Preface of A Cabinet of Gems. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Devorah Allen. A Cabinet of Gems, cut and polished by Sir Philip Sidney. Now for the more radiance, presented without their setting, by George MacDonald. Preface. By these extracts from writings I have long loved, I hope to help some of my friends to a genuine acquaintance with the writer, who was the center of more personal affection and admiration than was ever anyone, I venture to think, of his years. He was but 32 when he died. For few of those to whom his name has been familiar from childhood as that of a famous man, know anything more of him than the story of his yielding the water brought him, when thirsty with excess of bleeding, to a dying soldier, with the words, "This man's necessity is still greater than mine." An instance of self-denial which, in the case of him who thus denied himself, needs move no astonishment. How worthless, then, is fame, when of him whom they praise, the praisers are so ignorant. But no one can gather even such drops as I here offer of the precious life-blood of a master spirit, if he be himself a true man, without in a measure knowing one of the noblest of Englishmen. Before a great man, the fool shouts. The wise man prays him to go home to his house. My extracts are mostly from his book called The Countess of Pembroke's Arcadia, because he wrote it for his sister, sending it to her in sheets as he wrote it. It was not printed till after his death, and had never, I believe, been revised by himself. In making these extracts, I have taken the following liberties. I have made shorter sentences out of long ones, purely by omission, and I have in a few places inserted or substituted a word necessary because of such omission to bring out the sense. The word is always put in italics. In an appendix, I have placed a few of the many psalms translated from the Hebrew by the Countess, manifesting her a poetess worthy of a place beside her brother. The praises written of Sir Philip would fill a volume. In a second appendix, I give a passage from an elegy by Matthew Royden, of whom little is known, and a few extracts from a eulogium of his friend by Sir Fulk Greville. G.M.D. Bordighera, January, 1891. End of preface.
Section 1 of A Cabinet of Gems. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Claire. A Cabinet of Gems by Sir Philip Sidney, edited by George MacDonald. Men. Having found in him a mind of most excellent composition, a piercing wit quite void of ostentation, high erected thoughts seated in a heart of courtesy, an eloquence as sweet in the uttering as slow to come to the uttering, a behavior so noble as gave a majesty to advertisy, the good old man was even enamored with a fatherly love towards him, or rather became his servant by the bonds such virtue laid upon him. He was honorably courteous and wronglessly valiant, confidently pleasant in conversation, and an excellent courtier without unfaithfulness. As soon as the spur of honor ceased, he willingly rested in peace of delights, being beloved in all companies for his lovely qualities, and, as a man may term it, winning cheerfulness. And he, not given greatly to struggle with his own disposition, followed the gentle current of it. He manifested a most virtuous mind in all his actions, being a gentleman indeed most rarely accomplished, excellently learned but without all vainglory, friendly without facetiousness, valiant, so as, for my part, I think the earth hath no man that hath done more heroical acts than he, and yet so valiant as he never durst do anybody injury, in behavior, some will say, ever sad, surely sober, and somewhat given to musing, but never uncourteous, his word ever led by his thought, and followed by his deed, rather liberal than magnificent, though the one wanted not, and the other had ever good choice of the receiver. All occasions were but steps for him to climb fame by. Nothing was so hard but his valor overcame, which yet still he so guided with true virtue, that although no man was in our parts spoken of, but he for his manhood, yet as though therein he excelled himself, he was commonly called the courteous Amphialus. To him all men would willingly have yielded the height of praise, but that his nature was such as to bestow it upon himself before any could give it. He taught me by word, and best by example, giving me in him so lively an image of virtue, as ignorance could not cast such mist over mine eyes as not to see and to love it. A prince that indeed especially measured his greatness by his goodness, and if for anything he loved greatness, it was because therein he might exercise his goodness. But being none of them who think all things done for which they have once given direction, he followed everywhere his commandment with his preference, which witnessed of every man's slackness or diligence, chastising the one and encouraging the other, suffered not the fruit of any profitable counsel, for want of timely taking, to be lost. He thought nature required nothing more of him than that he should be a help to them of like creation, and had his heart no whit commanded with fear. But in the end, wisdom being an essential and not an opinionate thing, made him rather to bend to what was in itself good, than what by evil minds might be judged not good. Self-love then first in him divided itself from vainglory, and made him find that the world of worthiness had not his whole globe comprised in his breast, but that it was necessary to have strong resistance against the strong assailing. His soul might well be separated from his body, but never alienated from the remembering of what was comely. This man, called Pamphilus, in birth I must confess is noble, but what is that to him if it shall be a stain to his dead ancestors to have left such an offspring? In shape, as you see, not uncomely indeed, the fit mask of his disguised falsehood. In conversation wittily pleasant, and pleasantly gamesome, his eyes full of merry simplicity, his words full of hearty companionableness, and such a one whose head would not think so staid as to think mischievously, delighted in all such things, which by imparting the delight to others makes the user thereof welcome, as music, dancing, hunting, feasting, riding, and such like. And to conclude, such a one as who can keep him at arm's end, he never wish a better companion. But under these qualities lies such a poisonous adder, as I will tell you, for by those gifts of nature and fortune, being in all places acceptable, he creeps, nay, to say truly, he flies so into the favor of poor silly women, that I would be too much ashamed to confess if I had not revenge in my hand, as well as shame in my cheeks. For his heart being wholly delighted in deceiving us, we could never be warned, but rather one bird caught served for a stale to bring in more. For having quite lost the way of nobleness, he strave to climb to the height of terribleness, giving sometimes prodigally, not because he loved them to whom he gave, but because he lusted to give. Delighted to be flattered at first for those virtues which were not in him, at length making his vices virtues worthy the flattering, with like judgment glorying when he had happened to do a thing well, as when he had performed some notable mischief. He chanced at that time, for indeed long time none lasted with him, to have next in use about him a man of the most envious disposition that, I think, ever infected the air with his breath, whose eyes could not look right upon any happy man, nor ears bear the burden of anybody's praise, contrary to the natures of all other plagues, plagued with others' well-being, making happiness the ground of his unhappiness, and good news the argument of his sorrow. In sum, a man whose favor no man could win but by being miserable. I was met with a drivelling old fellow, lean, shaking both of head and hands, already half earth, and yet then most greedy of earth, who scarcely would give me thanks for what I had done, for fear, I suppose, that thankfulness might have an introduction of reward. In sum, such a man as any enemy could not with him worse than to be himself. These two were no more settled in valor than disposed to goodness and justice, if either they had lighted on a better friend, or could have learned to make friendship a child, and not the father of virtue. But bringing up rather than choice, having first knit their minds unto him, they willingly held out the course, rather to satisfy him than all the world, and rather to be good friends than good men. so as though they did not like the evil he did, yet they liked him that did the evil, and though not counselors of the offense, yet protectors of the offender. But Plexirtus, finding that, if nothing else, famine would at last bring him to destruction, thought better by humbleness to creep, where by pride he could not march. For certainly so had nature formed him, and the exercise of craft conformed him to all turningness of slates, that though no man had less goodness in his soul than he, no man could better find the places whence arguments might grow of goodness to another, though no man felt less pity, no man could tell better how to stir pity, no man more impotent to deny where proofs were not manifest, no man more ready to confess with a repenting manner of aggravating his own evil, where denial would but make the fault fouler. There died of his hand the old knight Aeschylus, who thought by years might well have been allowed to use rather the exercises of wisdom than of courage, yet having a lusty body and a merry heart, he ever took the summons of time in jest, or else it had so creepingly stolen upon him that he had heard scarcely the noise of his feet, and therefore was as fresh in apparel and as forward in enterprises as a far younger man. The princes taught them at one instant to promise themselves the best, and yet to despise the worst. Antipholus, like a bladder swelled, ready to break while it was full of the wind of prosperity that being out, was so objected as apt to be trod on by everybody. Then gave they themselves to consider in what sort they might defend their causes, for they thought it no less vain to wish death than cowardly to fear it. End of Section 1. Section 2 of A Cabinet of Gems. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Claire. A Cabinet of Gems by Sir Philip Sidney, edited by George MacDonald. Women. He married a young princess, a woman of great wit, of most unspotted chastity, but of so working a mind and so vehement spirits, as a man may say it was happy she took a good course, for otherwise it would have been terrible. Philoclea, so bashful, as though her excellencies had stolen into her before she was aware, so humble that she will put all pride out of countenance. But Cecropia, like a bat, which though it have eyes to discern that there is a sun, yet hath so evil eyes that it cannot delight in the sun, found a truth, but could not love it. Yet all the while she spake, though with eyes cast like a horse that would strike at the stirrup, and with colour which blushed through yellowness, she sat rather still than quiet. As she went to the temple to be married, her eyes themselves seemed a temple wherein love and beauty were married. Her lips, though they were kept close with modest silence, yet with a pretty kind of natural swelling, they seemed to invite the guests that looked on them. Her cheeks blushing, and withal, when she was spoken unto, a little smiling, were like roses when their leaves are with a little breath stirred. Her hair being laid at the full length down her bare back, show, as if the voward failed, yet that would conquer. That which made her fairness much the fairer was, that it was but a fair ambassador of a most fair mind, full of wit, and a wit which delighted more to judge itself than to shew itself, her speech being as rare as precious, her silence without fullness, her modesty without affection, her shamefulness without ignorance. Her face, when it was fairest, had been but as a marshal to lodge the love of her in his mind, which now was so well placed as it needed no further help of any outward harbinger. Pamela was working upon a purse certain roses and lilies, as by the finesse of the work one might see she had borrowed her wits of the sorrow that then owed them, and lent them wholly to that exercise. For the flowers she had wrought carried such life in them that the cunningest painter might have learned of her needle, which was so pretty a manner made his careers and fro through the cloth, as if the needle itself would have been loath to have gone fromward such a mistress, but that it hoped to return thitherward very quickly again. The cloth looking with many eyes upon her, and lovingly embracing the wounds she gave it. The shears also were at hand to behead the silk that was grown too short. And if at any time she put her mouth to bite it off, it seemed that where she had been long in making of a rose with her hands, she would in an instant make roses with her lips, as the lilies seemed to have their whiteness rather of the hand that made them than of the matter whereof they were made, and that they grew there by the suns of her eyes, and were refreshed by the most, in discomfort, comfortable air, which an unawares sigh might bestow upon them. But the colours for the ground were so well chosen, neither sullenly dark nor glaringly lightsome, and so well proportioned as that, though much cunning were in it, yet it was but to serve for an ornament of the principal work. I am not yet come to that degree of wisdom to think light of the sex of whom I have my life, since if I be anything, I was to come to it born of a woman and nursed of a woman, and certainly it is strange to see the unmanlike cruelty of mankind, who, not content with their tyrannous ambition, to have brought the others' virtuous patience under them like childish matters, think their masterhood nothing without doing injury to them, who, if we will argue by reason, are framed of nature with the same parts of the mind, for the exercise of virtue as we are. And truly, we men and praisers of men should remember that if we have such excellencies, it is reason to think them excellent creatures of whom we are, since a kite never brought forth a good flying hawk. As the greatest thing the world can shew is her beauty, so the least thing that may be praised in her is her beauty. Certainly, as her eyelids are more pleasant to behold than two white kids, climbing up a fair tree and browsing on his tenderest branches, and yet are nothing compared to the day shining stars contained in them. And as her breath is more sweet than a gentle southwest wind which comes creeping over flowery fields and shadowed waters in the extreme heat of summer, and yet is nothing compared to the honey-flowing speech that breath doth carry, no more all that our eyes can see of her, though when they have seen her, what else they shall ever see is but dry stubble after clover grass, is to be matched with the flock of unspeakable virtues laid upon delightfully in that best builded fold. Never the earth on his round shoulders bear a maid trained up from high or low degree, that in her doings better could compare. Mirth with respect, few words with courtesy, a careless comeliness with comely care, self-guard with mildness, sport with majesty. Cecropia had taught her to think that there is no wisdom but including both heaven and earth in one's self, and that love, courtesy, gratefulness, friendship, and all other virtues are rather to be taken on than taken in oneself. He had taken to wife one that in divers places I had heard before blazed as waywardly proud, and therefore bold because extremely faulty, and yet having no good thing to redeem both these and other unlovely parts, but a little beauty, disgraced with wandering eyes and unweighed speeches. And that, which seemeth most impossible unto me, she could not only sigh when she would, as all can do, and weep when she would, as they say some can do, but being most impudent in her heart, she could, when she would, teach her cheeks blushing, and make shamefastness the cloak of shamelessness. Her nose, her chin, per ivory wears, no purer than the pretty ears, so that therein appears some blood, like wine and milk that mingled stood. In whole in circlets, if ye gaze, your eyes may tread a lover's maze. But with such turns the voice to stray, no talk untaught can find the way. The tip no jewel needs to wear, the tip is jewel of the ear. But how the graces do impart to all her limbs a special grace, becoming every time and place. How all this is but a fair inn, of fairer guests which dwell therein. No tongue can her perfection tell, in whose each part all tongues may dwell. Before her marched two after two certain footmen pleasantly attired, who between them held one picture after another of them that had lost the prize in the race of beauty. Of a fair contrary consideration was the representation of her that next followed, who, though of so brown a hair as no man should have injured to have called it black, and that in the mixture of her cheeks the white did so much overcome the red, though what was very pure, that it came near to paleness, and that her face was a thought longer than the exact symmetrians perhaps would allow, yet love played his part so well in every part that it caught hold of the judgment before it could judge, making it first love, and after acknowledge it fair, for there was a certain delicacy which in yielding conquered, and with a pitiful look made one find cause to crave help himself. But she that followed conquered indeed with being conquered, and might well have made all the beholders wait upon her triumph, while herself were led captive. It was the excellently faired Queen Helen, whose hyacinth hair, curled by nature but intercurled by art, like a fine brook through golden sands, had a rope of fair pearl, which now hiding, now hidden by the hair, did, as it were, play at fast and loose, each with other, mutually giving and receiving richness. In her face so much beauty and favour expressed as, if Helen had not been known, some would rather have judged it the painter's exercise to shew what he could do than the counterfeiting of any living pattern. For no fault the most fault-finding wit could have found, if it were not that to the rest of the body the face was somewhat too little, but that little was such a spark of beauty as was able to inflame a world of love. For everything was full of a choice fineness, that if it wanted anything in majesty, it supplied it with increase in pleasure, and if at the first it strake not with admiration, it ravished with delight. As for her attire, it was costly and curious, though the look fixed with more sadness than it seemed nature had bestowed to any that knew her fortune, bewrayed that as she used those ornaments not for herself, but to prevail with another, so she feared that all would not serve. Of a far differing, though esteemed equal beauty, was the fair Parthenia, for in her everything was goodly and stately, yet so that it might seem that great-mindedness was but the insignibare to the humbleness, for her great grey eye, which might seem full of her own beauty, a large and exceedingly fair forehead, with all the rest of her face and body cast in the mould of nobleness, was yet so attired as might shew the mistress thought it either not to deserve or not to need any exquisite decking, having no adorning but cleanliness, and so far from all art that it was full of carelessness, unless that carelessness itself, in spite of itself, grew artificial. Next after her was born the counterfeit of the Princess of Elis, a lady that taught the beholders no other point of beauty but this, that, as liking is not always the child of beauty, so whatsoever liketh is beautiful. For in that visage there was neither majesty, grace, favour, nor fairness, yet she wanted not a fervent that would have made her fairer than the fair Artexia. After her was the goodly Artexia, great queen of Armenia, a lady upon whom nature bestowed and well placed her most delightful colours, and withal had proportioned her without any fault, quickly to be discovered by the senses, yet altogether seemed not to make up that harmony that Cupid delights in, the reason whereof might seem a mannish countenance, which overthrew that lovely sweetness, the noblest power of womankind, far fitter to prevail by parley than by battle. The next picture was of a young maid, which sat pulling out a thorn out of a lamb's foot, with her look so attentive upon it, as if that little foot could have been the circle of her thoughts, her apparel so poor as it had nothing but the inside to adorn it, a sheep's hook lying by her with a bottle upon it. But with all that poverty, beauty played the prince, and commanded as many hearts as the greatest queen there did. They saw a maid, who thitherward did run to catch her sparrow, which from her did swerve, as she a black silk cap on him begun to set for soil of his milk white to serve. She chirping ran, he peeping flew away. How well apaid she was her bird to find, how tenderly her tender hands between an ivory cage she did not mitre bind. How rosy moistened lips about his beak, moving she seemed at once to kiss and speak. She liked not his desire, fain would be free, but dreadeth parents' ire. Kindly sweet soul, she did not unkindness take, that bagged baggage of a miser's mud should price of her as in a market make. But gold can gild a rotten piece of wood, to yield she found her noble heart to ache, to strive she feared how it with virtue stood. Thus doubting clouds, o'ercasting heavenly brain, at length in rows of kissed cheeks tears they rain. This incessantly boiled in her breast, but most of all when, Philanax having closely imprisoned her, she was left more freely to suffer the firebrands of her own thoughts, especially when it grew dark and had nothing left by her but a little lamp, whose small light to a perplexed mind might rather yield fearful shadows than any assured sight. Then began the heaps of her miseries to weigh down the platform of her judgment, then began despair to lay his ugly claws upon her, She began then to fear the heavenly powers she was wont to reverence, not like a child, but like an enemy. Neither kept she herself from blasphemous repining against her creation. O gods, would she cry out, why did you make me to destruction? If you love goodness, why did you not give me a good mind? Or, if I cannot have it without your gift, why do you plague me? Is it in me to resist the mightiness of your power? For when reason taught her there was no resistance, for to just resistance first her heart was inclined, then with so heavenly a quietness, and so graceful a calmness, did she suffer the divers kinds of torments they used to her, that while they vexed her fair body, it seemed that she rather directed than obeyed the vexation. To the disgrace of men, shewing that there are women both more wise to judge what is to be expected, and more constant to bear it when it is happened. But, as in labor, the more one doth exercise it, the more by the doing one is enabled to do, strength growing upon the work, so as what at first would have seemed impossible after grows easy. So these princesses, with the use of suffering their minds, gat at the habit of suffering, so as all fears and terrors were to them but summons to a battle whereof they knew beforehand they should be victorious, and which in the suffering was painful, being suffered was a trophy to itself. In whom a man might perceive what small difference in the working there is betwixt a simple voidness of evil and judicial habit of virtue. For she, not with an unshaken magnanimity, wherewith Pyrocles weighed and despised death, but with an innocent guiltlessness, not knowing why she should fear to deliver her unstained soul to God, helped with the true loving of Pyrocles, which made her think no life without him did almost bring her mind to as quiet attending all accidents as the unmastered virtue of Pyrocles. The sweet-minded Philotia was in their degree of well-doing, to whom the not knowing of evil serveth for a ground of virtue, and who hold their inward powers in better form with an unspotted simplicity than many who rather cunningly seek to know what goodness is, than willingly take into themselves the following of it. But as that sweet and simple breath of heavenly goodness is the easier to be altered because it hath not passed, though the worldly wickedness, nor feelingly found the evil that evil carries with it, so now the Lady Philoclea, whose eyes and senses had received nothing but according as the natural course of each thing required, whose tender youth had obediently lived under her parents' behests, without framing out of her will the forechoosing of anything, when now she came to a point wherein her judgment was to be practised in knowing faultiness by his first tokens, she was like a young fawn, who coming into the wind of the hunters doth not know whether it be a thing or no to be eschewed, whereof at this time she began to get a costly experience. The other was of a fine daintiness of beauty, her face carrying in it a sober simplicity, like one that could do much good, and meant no hurt, her eyes having in them such a cheerfulness as nature seemed to smile in them, though her mouth and cheeks obeyed to that pretty demureness. And therefore she went softly to Philoclea's chamber, and peeping through the side of the door, then being a little open, she saw Philoclea sitting low upon a cushion in such a given-over manner that one would have thought silence, solitariness, and melancholy were come there under the ensign of mishap, to conquer delight and drive him from his natural feet of beauty. Her tears came dropping down like rain and sunshine, and she not taking heed to wipe the tears, they hung upon her cheeks and lips as upon cherries, which the dropping tree bedwith. And the dressing of her hair and apparel she might see neither a careful art, nor an art of carelessness, but even left to a neglected chance, which yet could no more unperfect her perfection than a die any way cast could lose his squareness. End of Section 2.
Section 3 of A Cabinet of Gems. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. A Cabinet of Gems by Sir Philip Sidney, edited by George MacDonald. Love and Marriage. His fame had so framed the way to my mind that his presence, so full of beauty, sweetness, and noble conversation, had entered there before he vouchsafed to call for the keys. O Lord, how did my soul hang at his lips while he spake! I can never deem that love, which in haughty hearts proceeds of a desire only to please, and as it were, peacock themselves. He did not there do homage of his eyes, but on his eyes his heart did sacrifice. To the tune of the Spanish song, "Se tu, señora, no dueles de mí." O fair, O sweet, when I do look on thee, in whom all joys so well agree, heart and soul do sing in me. This, you hear, is not my tongue, which once said what I conceive it, for it was of use bereaved, with the cruel answer stung. No, though tongue to roof be cleaved, fearing lest he chastised be, heart and soul do sing in me. O fair, O sweet, when I do look on thee, in whom all joys so well agree, heart and soul do sing in me. Just accord all music makes, in thee just accord excelleth, where each part in such peace dwelleth, one of other beauty takes. Since then truth to all minds telleth, that in thee lives harmony, heart and soul do sing in me. O fair, O sweet, when I do look upon thee, in whom all joys so well agree, heart and soul do sing in me. They that heaven have known do say that whoso that grace obtaineth, to see what fair sight there reigneth, forced are to sing alway. So then, since that heaven remaineth in thy face, I plainly see, heart and soul do sing in me. O fair, O sweet, when I do look on thee, in whom all joys so well agree, heart and soul do sing in me. Sweet, think not I am at ease, for because my chief part singeth, this song from death's sorrow springeth, as to swan in last disease, for no dumbness nor death bringeth stay to true love's melody. Heart and soul do sing in me. Excellent lady, know that if my heart were mine to give, you, before all other, should have it. But Parthenia's it is, though dead. There I began, there I end all matter of affection. I hope I shall not long tarry after her, with whose beauty I had only been in love. I should be so with you who have the same beauty, but it was Parthenia's self I loved, and love, which no likeness can make one, no commandment dissolve, no foulness defile, nor no death finish. Thou hast then the victory, use it with virtue. Thy virtue won me, with virtue preserve me. Dost thou love me? Keep me then still worthy to be loved. Alas, a cloud hath overcast mine eyes, and yet I see her shine amid the cloud. Alas, of ghosts I hear the ghastly cries, yet there, meseems, I hear her singing loud. But neither the liked persuasions, nor feared threatenings, nor changed for absence, and when she thought him dead, she sought all means, as well by poison as knife, to send her soul at least to be married in the eternal church with him. My sheep are thoughts, which I both guide and serve. Their pasture is fair hills of fruitless love. On barren sweets they feed, and feeding, starve. I wail their lot, but will not other prove. My sheephook is one hope which all upholds. My weeds, desire, cut out in endless folds. What wool my sheep shall bear, whiles thus they live, in you it is, you must the judgment give. The messenger made speed, and found Argalus at a castle of his own, sitting in a parlour with the fair Parthenia, he reading in a book the stories of Hercules, she by him as to hear him read, but while his eyes looked on the book, she looked on his eyes, and sometimes staying him with some pretty question, not so much to be resolved of the doubt as to give him occasion to look upon her. A happy couple, he joying in her, she joying in herself, but in herself because she enjoyed him. Both increased their riches by giving to each other, each making one life double, because they made a double life one, where desire never wanted satisfaction, nor satisfaction ever bred satiety, he ruling because she would obey, or rather because she would obey, she therein ruling. But with that Argalus came out of his swoon, and lifting up his languishing eyes, which a painful rest and iron sleep did seek to lock up, seeing her in whom even dying he lived, and himself seated in so beloved a place. It seemed a little cheerful blood came up to his cheeks like a burning coal, almost dead if some breath a little revive it, and forcing up, the best he could, his feeble voice, "My dear, my better half," said he, "I find I must now leave thee, and by that sweet hand and fair eyes of thine I swear that death brings nothing with it to grieve me, but that I must leave thee, and cannot remain to answer part of thy infinite deserts with being some comfort unto thee. But since so it pleaseth him whose wisdom and goodness guideth all, put thy confidence in him, and one day we shall blessedly meet again, never to depart. Meanwhile live happily, dear Parthenia, and I persuade myself it will increase the blessedness of my soul so to see thee. Love well the remembrance of thy loving, and truly loving, Argalus, and let not," with that word he sighed, "this disgrace of mine make thee one day think thou hadst an unworthy husband." They could scarcely understand the last words, for death began to seize himself of his heart. Neither could Parthenia make answer, so full was her breast of anguish, but while the other sought to stanch his remediless wounds, she with her kisses made him happy, for his last breath was delivered into her mouth. "There rests nothing now, but that I go live with him, since whose death I have done nothing but die." Then, pausing and a little fainting, and again coming to herself, "Oh, sweet life, welcome," said she. "Now feel I the bands untied of the cruel death which so long hath held me, and, O life, O death, answer for me that my thoughts have not so much as in a dream tasted any comfort since they were deprived of Argalus. I come, my Argalus, I come, and, O God, hide my faults in thy mercies, and grant, as I feel thou dost grant, that in thy eternal love we may love each other eternally. And this, O Lord," but here Atropos cut off her sentence, for with that, casting up both eyes and hands to the skies, the noble soul departed. One might well assure himself to heaven, which left the body in so heavenly a demeanour. Let thy love be loved, thy desires prosperous, thy escape safe, and thy journey easy. Let everything yield his help to thy desert. For my part, absence shall not take thee from mine eyes, nor afflictions shall bar me from gladding in thy good, nor a possessed heart shall keep thee from the place it hath for ever allotted unto thee. My true love hath my heart, and I have his, by just exchange one for the other given. I hold his dear, and mine he cannot miss, there never was a bargain better driven. His heart in me keeps him and me in one, my heart in him his thoughts and senses guides. He loves my heart, for once it was his own, and I cherish his because in me it abides. His heart his wound received from my fight, my heart was wounded with his wounded heart. For as from me on him his hurt did light, so still methought in me his hurt did smart. Both equal hurt, in this change sought our bliss. My true love hath my heart, and I have his. But, as if the shepherd that lay before her had been organs, which were only to be blown by her breath, she had no sooner ended with the joining her sweet lips together, but that he recorded to her music his rural poesy. O words which fall like summer dew on me, O breath more sweet than is the growing bean, O tongue in which all honeyed liquors be, O voice that doth the thrush in shrillness stain, do you say still this is her promised due, that she is mine, as I to her am true? Gay hair, more gay than straw when harvest lies, lips red and plum as cherries ruddy side, eyes fair and great, like fair great ox's eyes, O breast in which two white sheep swell in pride, join you with me to seal this promise due, that she be mine as I to her am true. O Lord, whensoever to the eternal darkness of the earth she doth follow me, let our spirits possess one place, and let them be more happy in that uniting. Believe me, man, there is no greater bliss than is the quiet joy of loving wife, which whoso wants half of himself doth miss. Friend without change, playfellow without strife, food without fullness, counsel without pride, is this sweet doubling of our single life. My heart, my word hath given my heart. The giver given from gift shall never part. Why dost thou haste away, O Titan fair, the giver of the day? Is it to carry news to western wights that stars in east appear? Or dost thou think that here is left a sun whose beams thy place may use? Yet stay and well peruse what be her gifts that make her equal thee. Bend all thy light to see in earthly clothes enclosed a heavenly spark. Thy running course cannot such beauties mark. No, no, thy motions be hastened from us with bar of shadow dark, because that thou, the author of our sight, disdainest we see thee stained with others' light. It is yourself I love, which can no more be diminished by these showers of evil hap, than flowers are marred with the timely rains of April. Nothing bred from myself can discomfort me, and fools' opinions I will not reckon as dishonour. O heaven, awake, show forth thy stately face. Let not these slumbering clouds thy beauties hide, but with thy cheerful presence help to grace the honest bridegroom and the bashful bride, whose loves may ever bide, like to the elm and vine, with mutual embracements them to twine, in which delightful pain, O Hymen, long their coupled joys maintain. Virtue, if not a god, yet God's chief part, be thou the knot of this their open vow, that still he be her head, she be his heart. He lean to her, she unto him do bow, each other still allow, like oak and mistletoe, her strength from him, his praise from her do grow. In which most lovely train, O Hymen, long their coupled joys maintain. All churlish words, shrewd answers, crabbed looks, all privateness, self-seeking, inward spite, all waywardness which nothing kindly brooks, all strife for toys and claiming master's right, be hence I put to flight. All stirring husband's hate gainst neighbour's good for womanish debate, be fled as things most vain. O Hymen, long their coupled joys maintain. All peacock pride, and fruits of peacock's pride, longing to be with loss of substance gay, with recklessness what may the house betide, so that you may on higher slippers stay, for ever hence away. Let not sluttery, the sink of filth, be counted housewifery, but keeping whole your mien, O Hymen, long their coupled joys maintain. But above all, away vile jealousy, the evil of evils, just cause to be unjust. How can he love, suspecting treachery? How can she love, where love cannot win trust? Go, snake, hide thee in dust, ne dare once show thy face, where open hearts do hold so constant place, that they thy sting restrain. O Hymen, long their coupled joys maintain. Musidorus, looking up to the stars, O mind of minds, said he, the living power of all things, which dost with all these eyes behold our ever-varying actions, accept unto thy favourable ears this prayer of mine. If I may any longer hold out this dwelling on the earth which is called a life, grant the ability to deserve at this lady's hands the grace she hath showed unto me. Grant me wisdom to know her wisdom, and goodness so to increase my love of her goodness, that all mine own chosen desires be to myself but second to her determinations. Yet, if there be that imperious power in the soul as it can deliver knowledge to another without bodily organs, so vehement were the working of their spirits as one met with another, though themselves perceived it not, but only thought it to be the doubling of their own loving fancies. If die we must, let us thank death he hath not divided so true an union. That sweet and heavenly uniting of the minds which properly is called love, hath no other knot but virtue, and therefore, if it be a right love, it can never slide into any action that is not virtuous. Marriage is the most holy conjunction that falls to mankind, out of which all families, and so consequently all societies, do proceed, which not only by community of goods, but community of children, is to knit the minds in a most perfect union, which whoso breaks dissolves all humanity, no man living free from the danger of so near a neighbour. But of such wives we find a slender crew. Shrewdness so stirs pride, so puffs up the heart. They seldom ponder what to them is due, with meagre looks as if they still did smart, puling or whimpering or else scolding flat, make home more pain than following of the cart, either dull silence or eternal chat, still contrary to what her husband says. If he do praise the dog, she likes the cat. Austere she is, when he would honest plays, and gamesome then when he thinks on his sheep. She bids him go, and yet from journey stays. She war doth ever with his kinsfolk keep, and makes them fremd, who friends by nature are, envying shallow toys with malice deep. Whatsoever she doth is ever in his eyes best, and that best being the continual motion of our changing life, turned by her to any other thing, that thing again becometh best. So that nature in each kind suffering but one superlative, the lover only admits no positive. If she sits still, that is best, for so is the conspiracy of her several graces held best together to make one perfect figure of beauty. If she walk, no doubt that is best, for besides the making happy, the more places by her steps, the very stirring adds a pleasing life to her native perfections. If she be silent, that without comparison is best, since by that means the untroubled eye most freely may devour the sweetness of his object. But if she speak, he will take it upon his death, that is best, the quintessence of each word being distilled down into his affected soul. Let clouds bedim my face, break in mine eye, let me no steps but of lost labour trace. Let all the earth with scorn recount my case, but do not will me from my love to fly. Profess indeed I do not Cupid's art, but you, fair maids, at length this true shall find, that his right badge is but worn in the heart. Dumb swans, not chattering pies, do lovers prove. They love indeed who quake to say they love. Long since, alas, my deadly swannish music hath made itself a crier of the morning, and hath with wailing strength climbed highest mountains. Long since my thoughts more desert be than forests. Long since I see my joys come to their evening, and slate thrown down to overtrodden valleys. Meseems I see the high and stately mountains transform themselves to low dejected valleys. Meseems I hear in these ill-changed forests the nightingales do learn of owls their music. Meseems I feel the comfort of the morning turn to the mortal serene of an evening. In the end, she said that, if she had been the princess, she would have requited his faith with faithful affection, finding in her heart that nothing could so heartily love as virtue, with many more words to the same sense of noble favour and chaste plainness. Let not a glittering name thy fancy dress in painted clothes, because they call it love. There is no hate that can thee more oppress. Begin, and half the work is done, to prove by rising up upon thyself to stand, and think that she is she that doth thee move. He water ploughs, and soweth in the sand, and hopes the flickering wind with net to hold, who hath his hopes laid upon woman's hand. It is most true that eyes are formed to serve the inward light, and that the heavenly part ought to be king, from whose rules do swerve rebels to nature, strive for their own smart. It is most true what we call Cupid's dart an image is, which for ourselves we carve, and fools adore in temple of our heart, till that good God made church and churchmen starve. True that true beauty virtue is indeed, whereof this beauty can be but a shade, which elements with mortal mixture breed. True that on earth we are but pilgrims made, and should in soul up to our country move. True, and yet true, that I must Stella love. Come, sleep, O sleep, the certain knot of peace, the baiting place of wit, the balm of woe, the poor man's wealth, the prisoner's release, the indifferent judge between the high and low. with shield of proof shield me from out the prease of those fierce darts despair at me doth throw. O make in me those civil wars to cease. I will good tribute pay if thou do so. Take thou of me smooth pillows, sweetest bed, a chamber deaf to noise and blind to light, a rosy garland and a weary head. And if these things, as being thine by right, move not thy heavy grace, thou shalt in me livelier than elsewhere Stella's image see. Having this day my horse, my hand, my lance, guided so well that I obtained the prize, both by the judgment of the English eyes, and of some sent from that sweet enemy France. Horsemen my skill in horsemanship advance, townsfolks my strength, a daintier judge applies his praise to sleight, which from good use doth rise. Some lucky wits impute it but a chance, others, because of both sides I do take my blood from them who did excel in this, think nature me a man of arms did make. How far they shot awry, the true cause is, Stella looked on, and from her heavenly face sent forth the beams which made so fair my race. O eyes which do the spheres of beauty move, whose beams be joys, whose joys all virtues be, who, while they make love conquer, conquer love, the schools where Venus hath learned chastity. O eyes, where humble looks most glorious prove, only love tyrants just in cruelty. Do not, O do not from poor me remove, keep still my zenith, ever shine on me. Stella oft sees the very face of woe painted in my beclouded stormy face, but cannot skill to pity my disgrace. Not though thereof the cause herself she know, yet hearing late a fable which did show of lovers never known a grievous case, pity thereof gat in her breast such place, that from that sea derived tears spring did flow. Alas, if fancy drawn by imaged things, though false, yet with free scope more grace doth breed than servants' rack, where new doubts honour brings. Then think, my dear, that you in me do read of lovers' ruin some sad tragedy. I am not I, pity the tale of me. Soul's joy, bend not those morning stars from me, where virtue is made strong by beauty's might, where love is chasteness, pain doth learn delight, and humbleness grows one with majesty. In martial sports I had my cunning tried, and yet to break more staves did me address, while with the people's shouts I must confess, youth, luck, and praise even filled my veins with pride, when Cupid, having me his slave, descried, in Mars his livery, prancing in the press. What now, Sir Fool, said he, I would no less. Look here, I say. I looked, and Stella spied, who hard by made a window send forth light. My heart then quaked, then dazzled were mine eyes. One hand forgot to rule, the other to fight. Nor trumpet's sound I heard, nor friendly cries. My foe came on and beat the air for me, till that her blush taught me my shame to see. Is that love? Forsooth, I trow, if I saw my good dog grieved, and a help for him did know, my love should not be believed, but he were by me relieved. In wonted walks since, wonted fancies change. Some cause there is, which of strange cause doth rise. For in each thing, whereto mine eye doth range, part of my pain meseems engraved lies. The rocks which were of constant mind the mark in climbing steep, now hard refusal show. The shading woods seem now my sun to dark, and stately hills disdain to look so low. The restful caves now restless visions give. In dales I see each way a hard ascent, like late mown meads, late cut from joy I live. Alas, sweet brooks do in my tears augment. Rocks, woods, hills, caves, dales, meads, brooks answer me. Infected minds infect each thing they see. With how sad steps, O moon, thou climbest the skies, how silently and with how wan a face. What, may it be that even in heavenly place that busy archer his sharp arrows tries? Sure, if that long with love acquainted eyes can judge of love, thou feelest a lover's case. I read it in thy looks, thy languished grace, to me that feel the like thy state descries. Then, even of fellowship, O moon, tell me, is constant love deemed there but want of wit? Are beauties there as proud as here they be? Do they above love to be loved, and yet those lovers scorn whom that love doth possess? Do they call virtue their ungratefulness? Oft have I mused, but now at length I find why those that die, men say they do depart. Depart, a word so gentle to my mind, weakly did seem to paint death's ugly dart. But now the stars with their strange course do bind me, one to leave with whom I leave my heart. I hear a cry of spirits faint and blind, that parting thus my chiefest part I part. Part of my life, the loathed part to me, lives to impart my weary clay some breath. But that good part wherein all comforts be, now dead, doth show departure is a death. Yea, worse than death. Death parts both woe and joy. From joy I part, still living in annoy. To the tune of Neapolitan Villanelle. All my sense thy sweetness gained, thy fair hair my heart enchained. My poor reason thy words moved, so that thee like heaven I loved. While to my mind the outside stood for messenger of inward good. Now thy sweetness sour is deemed, thy hair not worth a hair esteemed. Reason hath thy words removed, finding that but words they proved. For no fair sign can credit win, if that the substance fail within. No more is thy sweetness glory, for thy knitting hair be sorry. Use thy words but to bewail thee, that no more thy beams avail thee. Lay not thy colours more to view, without the picture be found true. Woe to me, alas, she weepeth. Fool, in me that folly creepeth. Was I to blaspheme enraged, where my soul I have engaged? And wretched I must yield to this, the fault I blame her chasteness is. Sweetness, sweetly pardon folly, tie me, hair, your captive wholly. Words, O words of heavenly knowledge, know my words their faults acknowledge. And all my life I will confess, the less I love, I live the less. Ring out your bells, let morning shows be spread, for love is dead, all love is dead, infected with plague of deep disdain, worth as not worth rejected, and faith fair scorn doth gain. From so ungrateful fancy, from such a female frenzy, from them that use men thus, good Lord, deliver us. Weep, neighbours, weep, do you not hear it said that love is dead? His deathbed, peacock's folly, his winding sheet is shame, his will, false seeming, holy, his sole executor blame. From so ungrateful fancy, from such a female frenzy, from them that use men thus, good Lord, deliver us. Let dirge be sung, and trentals rightly read, for love is dead. Sir Wrong his tomb ordaineth, my mistress' marble heart, which epitaph containeth, her eyes were once his dart. From so ungrateful fancy, from such a female frenzy, from them that use men thus, good Lord, deliver us. Alas, I lie, rage hath his error bred, love is not dead, love is not dead, but sleepeth in her unmatched mind, where she his counsel keepeth, till due desert she find. Therefore, from so vile fancy, to call such wit a frenzy, who love can temper thus, good Lord, deliver us. If that be sin which doth the manners frame, well stayed with truth in word and faith of deed, ready of wit and fearing naught but shame, if that be sin which in fixed hearts doth breed a loathing of all loose unchastity, then love is sin, and let me sinful be. End of section 3. Read by Sandra in Nova Scotia, 2024.
Section 4 of A Cabinet of Gems. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Claire. A Cabinet of Gems by Sir Philip Sidney, edited by George MacDonald. Religion. And so she might perceive that Pamela did walk up and down, full of deep though patient thoughts. For her look and countenance was settled, her pace soft and almost still of one measure, without any passionate gesture or violent motion, till at length, as is were awakening and strengthening herself, "Well," she said, "yet this is the best of this, I am sure, that howsoever they wrong me, they cannot overmaster God. No darkness blinds his eyes, no jail bars him out. To whom then else should I fly, but to him for succor?" And therewith kneeling down, even where she stood, she thus said, "O all-seeing light and eternal life of all things, to whom nothing is either so great that it may resist, or so small that it is contemned, look upon my misery with thine eye of mercy, and let thine infinite power vouchsafe to limit out some proportion of deliverance unto me, as to thee shall seem most convenient. Let not injury, O Lord, triumph over me, and let my faults by thy hand be corrected, and make not mine unjust enemy the minister of thy justice. But yet, my God, if in thy wisdom this be the aptest chastisement for my unexecutionable folly, if this low bondage be fittest for my over-high desires, if the pride of my not enough humble heart be thus to be broken, O Lord, I yield unto thy will, and joyfully embrace what sorrow thou wilt have me suffer. Only thus much let me crave of thee. Let my craving, O Lord, be accepted of thee, since even that proceeds from thee. Let me crave even by the noblest title, which in my greatest affliction I may give myself, that I am thy creature, and by thy goodness, which is thyself, that thou wilt suffer some beam of thy majesty so to shine into my mind, that it may still depend confidently on thee. Let calamity be the exercise, but not the overthrow of my virtue. Let their power prevail, but prevail not to destruction. Let my greatness be their prey. Let my pain be the sweetness of their revenge. Let them, if so it seem good unto thee, vex me with more and more punishment. But, O Lord, let never their wickedness have such a hand, but that I may carry a pure mind and a pure body. And pausing a while, "And, O most gracious Lord," said she, "whatever become of me, persevere the virtuous Musiderus." The other part Cecropia might well hear, but this later prayer for Musidius her heart held as so jewel-like a treasure that it would scarce trust her own lips withal. But this prayer, sent to heaven from so heavenly a creature, with such a servant grace, as if devotion had borrowed her body to make of itself a most beautiful representation. With her eyes so lifted to the skyward that one would have thought they had begun to fly thitherward to take their place among their fellow stars, her naked hands raising up their whole length, and as it were kissing one another, as if the right had been the picture of zeal and the left of humbleness, which both united themselves to make their fruits more acceptable. Lastly, all her senses, being rather tokens than instruments of her inward motions altogether, had so strange a working power, that even the hard-hearted wickedness of Cecropia, if it found not a love of that goodness, yet it felt an abashment at that goodness. And if she had not a kindly remorse, yet had she an irksome accusation of her own naughtiness, so that she was put from the bias of her foreintended lesson. For well she found there was no way at that time to take that mind, but with some at least image of virtue, and what the figure thereof was, her heart knew not. The heavenly powers are to be reverenced and not searched into, and their mercies rather by prayers to be sought than their hidden counsels by curiosity. Certain it is, the God which is God of nature doth never teach unnaturalness. A virtuous man, without any respect whether the grief be less or more, is never to do that which he cannot assure himself is allowable before the ever-living rightfulness, but rather is to think honours or shames which stand in other men's true or false judgments, pains or not pains, which yet never approach our souls, to be nothing in regard of an unspotted conscience. O man, take heed how though the gods do move to cause full wrath which thou canst not resist. Blasphemous words the speaker vain do prove. Alas, while we are wrapped in foggy mist of our self-love, so passions do deceive. We think they hurt when most they do assist. To harm us worms should that high justice leave his nature, nay himself. For so it is, what glory from our loss can he receive? But still our dazzled eyes their way do miss, while that we do at his sweet scourge repine, the kindly way to beat us on to bliss. Psalm 42 from the Hebrew. Quae memodum. As the chaste heart which brayeth, seeking some refreshing brook, so my soul in panting playeth, thirsting on my God to look. My soul thirsts indeed in me, after ever living thee. Ah, when comes my blessed being of thy face to have a seeing? Day and night my tears outflowing have been my ill-feeding food, with their daily questions throwing, where is now thy God so good? My heart melts remembering so how in troops I want to go, leading them his praises singing, holy dance to God's house bringing. Why art thou, my soul, so sorry, and in me so much dismayed? Wait on God, for yet his glory in my song shall be displayed, when but with one look of his he shall me restore to bliss. Ah, my soul itself appalleth, in such longing thoughts it falleth. For my mind on my God bideth, even from Hermon's dwelling led, from the grounds where Jordan slideth, and from Miser's hilly head. One deep with noise of his fall, other deeps of woes doth call, while my God with wafting wonders on me retch his tempest thunders. All thy floods on me abounded, over me all thy waves went, yet thus still my hope is grounded, that thy anger being spent, I by day thy love shall taste, I by night shall singing last, praying prayers still bequeathing to my God that gave me breathing. I will say, O Lord, my tower, why am I forget by thee? Why should grief my heart devour, while the foe oppresseth me? Those vile scoffs of naughty ones wound and rent me to the bones, when foes ask with foul deriding, where is now your God abiding? Why art thou, my soul, so sorry, and in me so much dismayed? Wait on God, for yet his glory in my song shall be displayed. To him my thanks shall be said, who is still my present aid, and in fine my soul be raised. God is my God, by me praised. Passions. What shall we win by taking reason's yoke? Reason. The joys you have shall be made permanent. Passions. But so we shall with grief learn to repent. Reason. Repent indeed, but that shall be your bliss. Passions. How know we that since present joys we miss? Reason. You know it not, of reason therefore known it. Passions. No reason yet had ever skill to show it. Reason. Then let us both to heavenly rules give place. Passions. Which passions kill and reason do deface. It is not for us to appoint that mighty majesty what time he will help us. The uttermost instant is scope enough for him to revoke everything to one's own desire, and therefore to predicate his determination is but a doubt of goodness in him who is nothing but goodness. But when indeed he doth either by sickness or outward force lay death upon us, then are we to take knowledge that such is his pleasure, and to know that all is well that he doth. That we should be masters of ourselves we can show at all no title nor claim, since neither we made ourselves nor bought ourselves we can stand upon no other right but his gift, which he must limit as it pleaseth him. Dear niece, or rather dear daughter, if my affection and wish might prevail therein, how much doth it increase, trow you, the earnest desire I have of this blessed match, to see these virtues of yours knit fast with such zeal of devotion, indeed the best bond which the most politic wits have found to hold man's wit in well-doing. For his children must first by fear be induced to know that which after, when they do know, they are most glad of. So are these bugbears of opinions brought by great clerks into the world to serve as shuels, scarecrows, to keep them from those faults whereto else the vanity of the world and weakness of senses might pull them. But in you, niece, whose excellency is such as it need not to be held up by the staff of vulgar opinions, I would not you should love virtue severely, for fear of, I know, not what which you see not, but even for the good effects of virtue which you see. Fear, and indeed foolish fear and fearful ignorance, was the first inventor of those conceits. For when they heard it thunder, not knowing the natural cause, they thought there was some angry body above that spake so loud, and ever the less they did perceive, the more they did conceive, whereof they knew no cause, that grew straight a miracle. Foolish folks, not marking that the alterations be but upon particular accidents, the universality being always one. Yesterday was but as today, and tomorrow will tread the same footsteps of his foregoers. So as it is manifest enough that all things follow but the course of their own nature, saving only man, who, while by the pregnancy of his imagination he strives to things supernatural, meanwhile he loseth his own natural felicity. Be wise, and that wisdom shall be a God unto thee. Be contented, and that is thy heaven, for else to think that those powers, if there be any such above, are moved either by the eloquence of our prayers, or in a chase at the folly of our actions, carries as much reason as if flies should think that men take great care which of them hums sweetest, and which of them flies nimblest. She would have spoken further to have enlarged and confirmed her discourse, when Pamela, whose cheeks were dyed in the beautifullest grain of virtuous anger, with eyes which glistered forth beams of disdain, thus interrupted her. Peace, wicked woman, peace, unworthy to breathe that dost not acknowledge the breath-giver, most unworthy to have a tongue which speaketh against him through whom you speaketh. Keep your affection to yourself, which, like a bemired dog, would defile with fawning. You say yesterday was as today, O foolish woman, and most miserable foolish, since wit make you foolish. What doth that argue but that there is a constancy in the everlasting governor? Would you have an inconstant God, since we count a man foolish that is inconstant? He is not seen, you say, and would you think him a God who might be seen by so wicked eyes as yours? Which yet might see enough if they were not like such who for sport's sake willingly hoodwink themselves to receive blows the easier. But though I speak to you without any hope of fruit in so rotten a heart, and there be nobody else here to judge of my speeches, yet be thou my witness, O Cbteddy, that my ears shall not be willingly guilty of my Creator's blasphemy. You say, because we know not the causes of things, therefore fear was the mother of superstition. Nay, because we know that each effect hath a cause that hath engendered a true and lively devotion. For this goodly work of which we are, and in which we live, hath not his being by chance, on which opinion it is beyond marvel by what chance any brain could stumble. For if it be eternal as you would seem to conceive of it, eternity and chance are things unsufferable together. For that is chanceable which happeneth, and if it happen, there was a time before it happened, when it might not have happened, or else it did not happen, and so, if chanceable, not eternal. And as absurd it is to think that if it had a beginning, his beginning was derived from chance. For chance could never make all things of nothing, and if there were substances before which by chance should meet to make up this work, thereon follows another bottomless pit of absurdities. For then those substances must needs have been from ever, and so eternal, and that eternal causes should bring forth chanceable effects, is as sensible as that the sun should be the author of darkness. Again, if it were chanceable, then was it not necessary whereby you take away all consequence? But we see in all things in some respect or other necessity of consequence. Therefore in reason we must needs know that the causes were necessary. Lastly, chance is variable, or else it is not to be called chance. But we see this work is steady and permanent. If nothing but chance had glued those pieces of this, all the heavy parts would have gone infinitely downward, the light infinitely upward, and so never have met to have made up this goodly body. For before there was a heaven or earth, there was neither a heaven to stay the height of the ring, or an earth which in respect of the round walls of heaven should become a centre. Lastly, perfect order, perfect beauty, perfect constancy, if these be the children of chance, let wisdom be counted the roots of wickedness. But you will say, it is so by nature, as much as if you said it is so because it is so. If you mean of many natures conspiring together, as in a popular government, to establish this fair estate, as if the elementish and ethereal parts should in their own town-house set down the bounds of each one's office, then consider what follows, that there must needs have been a wisdom which made them concur, for their natures being absolutely contrary, in nature rather would have fought each other's ruin, than have served as well consorted parts to such an unexpressible harmony. For, that contrary things should meet to make up a perfection without force and wisdom above their powers, is absolutely impossible, unless you will fly to that hissed out opinion of chance again. But you may perhaps affirm that one universal nature which hath been forever is the knitting together of these many parts to such an excellent unity. If you mean a nature of wisdom, goodness, and providence, which knows what it doth, then say you that which I seek of you, and cannot conclude those blasphemies with which you defiled your mouth and mine ears. But if you mean a nature as we speak of the fire, which goeth upward, it knows not why, and of the nature of the sea, which in ebbing and flowing seems to observe so just a dance, and yet understands no music, it is but still the same absurdity superscribed with another title. For this word one being attributed to that which is all, but is one mingling of many and many ones, as in a less matter when we say one kingdom which contains many cities, or one city which contains many persons, wherein the under ones, if there be not a superior power and wisdom, cannot by nature regard any preservation but of themselves. No more we see they do, since the water willingly quenches the fire and drowns the earth. So far are they from a conspired unity, but that a right heavenly nature indeed, as it were unnaturing them, doth so bridle them. Again, it is as absurd in nature that from an unity many contraries should proceed still kept in a unity as that from the number of contraries a unity should arise. I say still, if you banish both a singularity and plurality of judgment from among them, then, if so earthly a mind can lift itself up so high, do but conceive how a thing whereto you give the highest and most excellent kind of being, which is eternity, can be of a base and vilest degree of being, and next to a not being, which is so to be as not to enjoy his own being. I will not here call all your senses to witness, which can hear nor see nothing which yields not most evident evidence of the unspeakableness of that wisdom, each thing being directed to an end, and an end of a preservation. So proper effects of judgment as speaking and laughing are of mankind. But what mad fury can ever so inveigle any conceit as to see our mortal and corruptible selves to have a reason, and that this universality, whereof we are but the least pieces, should be utterly devoid thereof? As if one should say that one's foot might be wise and himself foolish. This heard I once alleged against such a godless mind as yours, who being driven to acknowledge this beastly absurdity, that our bodies should be better than the whole world, if it had the knowledge whereof the other were void, he sought not able to answer directly, to shift it off in this sort, that if that reason were true, then must it follow also that the world must have in it a spirit that could write and read too, and be learned, since that was in us commendable. Wretched fool, not considering that books be but supplies of defects, and so are praised because they help our want, and therefore cannot be incident to the eternal intelligence, which needs no recording of opinions to confirm his knowledge no more than the sun wants wax to be the fuel of his glorious lightfulness. This world, therefore, cannot otherwise consist but by a mind of wisdom which governs it, which whether you will allow to be the creator thereof, as undoubtedly he is, or the soul and governor thereof, most certain it is, that whether he govern all or make all, his power is above either his creatures or his government, and if his power be above all things, then consequently it must needs be infinite, since there is nothing above it to limit it. For beyond which there is nothing must needs be boundless and infinite. If his power be infinite, then likewise must his knowledge be infinite, for else there should be an infinite proportion of power which he should not know how to use, the unsensibleness whereof I think even you can conceive. And if infinite, then must nothing know not the estate of flies, which you with so unsavory scorn did jest at, be unknown unto him. For if there were, then were his knowledge bounded, and so not infinite. If his knowledge and power be infinite, then must needs his goodness and justice march in the same rank. For infiniteness of power and knowledge, without like measure of goodness, must necessarily bring forth destruction and ruin, and not ornament and preservation. Since there is a God, and an all-knowing God, so as he seeth into the darkest of all natural secrets, which is the heart of man, and sees therein the deepest dissembled thoughts, nay, sees the thoughts before they be thought, since he is just to exercise his might, and mighty to perform his justice, assure thyself, most wicked woman, that hast so plaguily corrupted mind as thou canst not keep the sickness to thyself, but must most wickedly infect others. Assure thyself, I say, for what I say depends of everlasting and unremovable causes, But the time will come when thou shalt know that power by feeling it, when thou shalt see his wisdom in the manifesting thy ugly shamefulness, and shalt only perceive him to have been a creator in thy destruction. But there I was, and there my calmly thoughts I fed on nature's sweet repast as healthful senses led. Her gifts my study was, her beauties were my sport, my work her works to know, her dwelling my resort. Those lamps of heavenly fire to fixed motion bound, the ever-turning spheres, the never-moving ground. What essence destiny hath, if fortune be or no, whence our immortal souls to mortal earth do stow. Footnote: come to it as a hawk to the falconer when he calls stow or take your place to it. End footnote. What life it is, and how that all these lives do gather, with outward maker's force, or like an inward father. Such thoughts methought I thought, and strained my single mind, then void of nearer cares, the depths of things to find. I will not be afraid, though legions round be laid, which all against me gather. I say no more but this, up, Lord, now time it is. Help me, my God and Father. But, Lord, lift thou upon our sight the shining clearness of thy face, where I have found more heart's delight than they whose store and harvest space of grain and wine fills storing place. So I in peace and peaceful bliss will lay me down and take my rest, for it is thou, Lord, thou it is, by power of whose own only breast I dwell, laid up in safety's nest. The song I sang old Lanquet had me taught, Lanquet the shepherd, best swift ifter knew, for clerkly reed and hating what is not, for faithful heart, clean hands, and mouth as true. With his sweet skill my skilless youth he drew, to have a feeling taste of him that fits beyond the heaven, far more beyond our wits. He said the music best, thilke powers pleased, was jump concord between our wit and will, where highest notes to godliness are raised, and lowest sink not down to jot of ill. With old true tales he wont mine ears to fill. Leave me, O love, which reachest but to dust, and thou, my mind, aspire to higher things. Grow rich in that which never taketh rust, whatever fades but fading pleasure brings. Draw in thy beams and humble all thy might to that sweet yoke where lasting freedoms be, which breaks the clouds and opens forth the light that doth both shine and give us sight to see. O take fast hold, let that thy light be thy guide, in this small course which birth draws out to death. And think how evil becometh him to slide, who seeketh heaven and comes of heavenly breath. Then farewell world, thy uttermost I see, eternal love, maintain thy life in me. Splendidus longum veladico nugis. Let this assured hold our judgments overtake, that nothing wins the heaven but what doth earth forsake. End of Section 4.
Section 5 of A Cabinet of Gems. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. A Cabinet of Gems by Sir Philip Sidney, edited by George MacDonald. Philosophy. O blame not the heavens, sweet Pericles, said Musidorus. As their course never alters, so is there nothing done by the unreachable ruler of them, but hath an everlasting reason for it. And to say the truth of these things, we should deal ungratefully with nature, if we should be forgetful receivers of her gift, and diligent auditors of the chances we like not. We have lived, and have lived to be good to ourselves and others. Our souls, which are put into the stirring earth of our bodies, have achieved the causes of their thither coming. They have known and honoured with knowledge the cause of their creation. And to many men, for in this time, place, and fortune, it is lawful for us to speak gloriously, it hath been behooveful that we should live, since then eternity is not to be had in this conjunction. What is to be lost by the separation but time, which since it hath his end, when that is once come, all that is past is nothing, and by the protracting nothing gotten but labour and care. Do not me therefore that wrong, who something in years, but much in all other deserts, am fitter to die than you, as to say you have brought me to any evil. since the love of you doth overbalance all bodily mischiefs, and those mischiefs be but mischiefs to the baser minds, too much delighted with the kennel of this life. Take the preeminence in all things but in true loving, answered Musidorus, for the confession of that no death shall get of me. Of that, answered Pericles, soberly smiling, I perceive we shall have a debate in the other world, if at least there remain anything of remembrance in that place. I do not think the contrary, said Musidorus, although you know it is greatly held that with the death of body and senses, which are not only the beginning, but dwelling and nourishing of passions, thoughts, and imaginations, they failing, memory likewise fails, which riseth only out of them, and then is there left nothing but the intellectual part or intelligence, which void of all moral virtues which stand in the mean of perturbations, doth only live in the contemplative virtue and power of the omnipotent good and soul of souls and universal life of this great work, and therefore is utterly void from the possibility of drawing to itself these sensible considerations. Certainly, answered Pericles, I easily yield that we shall not know one another, and much less these past things, with a sensible or a passionate knowledge. For the cause being taken away, the effects follow. Neither do I think we shall have such a memory as now we have, which is but a relic of the senses, or rather a print the senses have left of things past in our thoughts. But it shall be a vital power of that very intelligence, which, as while it was here, it held the chief seat of our life, and was as it were the last resort to which, of all our knowledges, the highest appeal came, and so by that means was never ignorant of our actions, though many times rebelliously resisted, always with this prison darkened. So much more, being free of that prison, and returning to the life of all things, where all infinite knowledge is, it cannot but be a right intelligence, which is both his name and being, of things both present and past, though void of imagining to itself anything, but even grown like to his Creator, hath all things with a spiritual knowledge before it, the difference of which is as hard for us to conceive as it was for us, when we were in our mother's wombs, to comprehend if anybody would have told us what kind of light we now in this life see, what kind of knowledge we now have. Yet now we do not only feel our present being, but we conceive what we were before we were born, though remembrance make us not do it, but knowledge, and though we are utterly without any remorse of any misery we might then suffer, even such and much more odds shall there be at that second delivery of ours, when void of sensible memory or memorative passion, we shall not see the colours but lives of all things that have been or can be, and shall, as I hope, know our friendship, though exempt from the earthly cares of friendship, having both united it and ourselves in that high and heavenly love of the unquenchable light. As he had ended his speech, Musidorus, looking with a heavenly joy upon him, sang this song unto him he had made before love turned his muse to another subject. Since nature's works be good, and death doth serve as nature's work, why should we fear to die? Since fear is vain, but when it may preserve, why should we fear that which we cannot fly? Fear is more pain than is the pain it fears, disarming human minds of native might, while each conceit an ugly figure bears, which were not evil, well viewed in reason's light. Our only eyes, which dimmed with passions be, and scarce discern the dawn of coming day, let them be cleared and now begin to see our life is but a step in dusty way. Then let us hold the bliss of peaceful mind, since this we feel, great loss we cannot find. Let death come and put on his worst face, for at the worst it is but a bugbear. Since the world will not have us, let it lose us. It becomes our birth to think of dying nobly, for we have done or suffered nothing which might make our soul ashamed at the departure of these bodies. Then will be the time to die nobly, when you cannot live nobly. And kissing his cheeks, O my Palladius, said he, let not our virtue now abandon us. Let us prove our minds are no slaves to fortune, but in adversity can triumph over adversity. Dear Diophantus, answered Musidorus, I thank you for this best care of my best part, but fear not, I have kept too long company with you to want now a thorough determination of these things. I well know there is nothing evil but within us, the rest is either natural or accidental. See the folly of your passion, said she, as though you should be nearer to her, you being dead and she alive, than she being dead and you alive. And if she be dead, was she not born to die? What then do you cry out for? Not for her, who must have died one time or other, but for some few years. So as it is time, and this world that seems so lovely things, and not Philoclea unto you. Time ever old and young is still revolved within itself, and never tasteth end. But mankind is for aye to naught resolved. We last short while, and build long-lasting places. I have long learned to set bodily pain but in the second form of my being. Who for each fickle fear from virtue shrinks, shall in this life embrace no worthy thing. No mortal man the cup of surety drinks. The heavens do not good haps and handfuls bring, but let us pick our good from out much bad, that still our little world may know his King. But certainly so long we may be glad, while that we do what nature doth require, and for the event we never ought be sad. End of section 5.
Section 6 of A Cabinet of Gems. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. A Cabinet of Gems by Sir Philip Sidney, edited by George MacDonald. Moral Sayings and Aphorisms. Wisdom and virtue be the only destinies appointed to man to follow. It can never be said that evil happeneth to him who falls accompanied with virtue. Oh no, he cannot be good that knows not why he is good, but stands so far good as his fortune may keep him unassayed. But coming once to that, his rude simplicity is either easily changed or easily deceived, and so grows that to be the last excuse of his fault, which seemed to have been the first foundation of his faith. No destiny nor influence whatsoever can bring man's wit to a higher point than wisdom and goodness. Whether your time call you to live or die, do both like a prince. The cause of all hath been the vanity which possesseth many, who, making a perpetual mansion of this poor baiting place of man's life, are desirous to know the certainty of things to come, wherein there is nothing so certain as our continual uncertainty. Never may he be old, that doth not reverence that age, whose heaviness, if it weigh down the frail and fleshly balance, it as much lifts up the noble and spiritual part. While there is hope left, let not the weakness of sorrow make the strength of it languish. Take comfort, and good success will follow. A mind well trained and long exercised in virtue doth not easily change any course it once undertakes, but upon well-grounded and well-weighed causes, For being witness to itself of his own inward good, it finds nothing without it of so high a price for which it should be altered. Even the very countenance and behaviour of such a man doth show forth images of the same constancy, by maintaining a right harmony betwixt it and the inward good, in yielding itself suitable to the virtuous resolution of the mind. Such a kind of contemplation is but a glorious title to idleness. The gods would not have delivered a soul into the body which had arms and legs, only instruments of doing, but that it were intended the mind should employ them, and that the mind should best know his own good or evil by practice, which knowledge was the only way to increase the one and correct the other. You will never live to my age without you keep yourselves in breath with exercise, and in heart with joyfulness. Too much thinking doth consume the spirits, and oft it falls out that while one thinks too much of his doing, he leaves to do the effect of his thinking. It was now better with willingness to purchase thanks than with the discontented doing to have the pain and not the reward. The highest point outward things can bring one unto is the contentment of the mind, with which no estate, without which all estates be miserable. O sweet Pericles, separate yourself a little, if it be possible, from yourself, and let your own mind look upon your own proceedings. So shall my words be needless, and you best instructed. Remember, for I know you know it, that if we will be men, the reasonable part of our soul is to have absolute commandment, against which if any sensual weakness arise, we are to yield all our sound forces to the overthrowing of so unnatural a rebellion, wherein how can we want courage, since we are to deal against so weak an adversary, that in itself is nothing but weakness? Nay, we are to resolve that, if reason direct it, we must do it, and if we must do it, we will do it. For to say I cannot is childish, and I will not, womanish. Do not deceive yourself, my dear cousin. There is no man suddenly either excellently good or extremely evil, but grows either as he holds himself up in virtue, or lets himself slide to viciousness. As the love of heaven makes one heavenly, the love of virtue virtuous, so doth the love of the world make one become worldly. I find indeed that all is but lip wisdom, which wants experience. Each excellent thing once well learned serves for a measure of all other knowledges. As well the soldier dieth which standeth still, as he that gives the bravest onset. Who shoots at the midday sun, though he be sure he shall never hit the mark, yet as sure he is he shall shoot higher than he who aims but at a bush. Which may well seem wonderful, but wonders are no wonders in a wonderful subject. High honour is not only gotten and borne by pain and danger, but must be nursed by the like, or else vanisheth as soon as it appears to the world. No remembrance of naughtiness delights me but mine own. But therefore true it is, that wickedness may well be compared to a bottomless pit, into which it is far easier to keep oneself from falling, than being fallen, to give oneself any stay from falling infinitely. And truly the hardness of the enterprise was not so much a bit as a spur unto me, knowing well that the journey of high honour lies not in plain ways. Let not thy tongue become a fiery match. No sword so bites as that evil tool annoys. Let our unpartial eyes a little watch our own demean, and soon we wonder shall that, hunting faults ourselves we did not catch. Into our minds let us a little fall, and we shall find more spots than leopard's skin. Then who makes us such judges over all? Think not lightly of never so weak an arm, which strikes with the sword of justice. In nature we know it is well to do well, and what is well and what is evil, but to be moved to do that which we know, or to be moved with desire to know, hoc opus hic labo est. Cruelty doth never enjoy a good cheap glory. They, like men indeed, fortifying courage with the true rapier of patience, did so endure, as they did rather appear governors of necessity than servants to fortune. If human chances can be counted an overthrow to him that stands upon virtue. Each virtue hath his time. If you command your soldier to march foremost, and he for courtesy put others before him, would you praise his modesty? Thus noble gold down to the bottom goes, when worthless cork aloft doth floating lie. Thus in thy lute least strings are loudest found, and lowest stops do yield the highest sound. If I should grant to your request, I should show an example in myself that I esteem the holy band of chastity to be but an imaginative rule, as you termed it, and not the truest observance of nature, the most noble commandment that mankind can have over themselves, as indeed both learning teacheth and inward feeling assureth. But yet, O man, rage not beyond thy need. Deem it no glory to swell in tyranny. Thou art of blood, joy not to see things bleed. Thou fearest death, think they are loath to die. A plaint of guiltless hurt doth pierce the sky. And you, poor beasts, in patience bide your hell, or know your strengths, and then you shall do well. Whatever comes out of despair cannot bear the title of valour, which should be lifted up to such a height, that holding all things under itself, it should be able to maintain his greatness even in the midst of miseries. But, said he, my lords, let not Timortus railing speech, who whatsoever he finds evil in his own soul, can with ease lay it upon another, make me lose your good favour. Consider that all well-doing stands so in the middle betwixt his two contrary evils, that it is a ready matter to cast a slanderous shade upon the most approved virtues. Who hath an evil tongue can call severity cruelty, and faithful diligence diligent ambition. Lay your hearts void of fortaken opinions, else whatsoever I do or say will be measured by a wrong rule, like them that have the yellow jaundice, everything seeming yellow unto them. Prepare yourself that, if it be possible, you may deliver up your spirit so much purer, as you more wash your wickedness with repentance. The cunningest pilot doth most dread the rocks. In equality of conjectures, we are not to take hold of the worse, but rather to be glad we may find any hope that mankind is not grown monstrous. Since a man is bound no further to himself than to do wisely, chance is only to trouble them that stand upon chance. Whatsoever being abused doth much harm, being rightly used, and upon the right use each thing receives his title, doth most good. It were an absurd cunning to make high ladders to go in a plain way. Exercise indeed we do, but that very far backwardly, for where we should exercise to know, we exercise as having known, and so is our brain delivered of much matter, which never was begotten by knowledge. O let them hear these sacred tunes, and learn in wonders' schools, to be, in things past bounds of wit, fools if they be not fools. Whosoever in great things will think to prevent all objections, must lie still and do nothing. Philanax was not of the modern minds, who make suitors magistrates, but did ever think the unwilling worthy man was fitter than the undeserving desirer. Who faileth one is false, though trusty to another. They are never alone, said I, that are accompanied with noble thoughts. Yet virtue seeks to satisfy others, said Basilius. Those that be good, said I, and they will be satisfied as long as they see no evil. Upon suspecting others comes of secret condemning themselves. In my country, the general goodness which is nourished in our hearts makes everyone think the strength of virtue in another, whereof they find the assured foundation in themselves. In mean caves oft treasure abides, to an hostelry a king comes, and so behind foul clouds full oft fair stars do lie hidden. This we learned after the death of those two worthy brothers, accusing their folly in having believed he could faithfully love who did not love faithfulness, wishing us to take heed how we placed our good will upon any other ground than proof of virtue, since length of acquaintance, mutual secrecies, nor height of benefits could bind a savage heart, no man being good to other, that is not good in himself. End of section 6. Read by Belinda McReynolds, Melbourne, 8th of March 2024. Section 7 of A Cabinet of Gems. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. A Cabinet of Gems by Sir Philip Sidney, edited by George MacDonald. Human Nature. Like a scholar who is only come to that degree of knowledge to find himself utterly ignorant, thus stands it with me. O imperfect proportion of reason, which can too much foresee and too little prevent! The handmaid of wisdom is slow of belief. The nature of desire itself is no easier to receive belief than it is hard to ground belief. For as desire is glad to embrace the first show of comfort, so is desire desirous of perfect assurance. And indeed my father is wont to speak of nothing with greater admiration than of the notable friendship, a rare thing in princes, more rare between princes, that so holily was observed to the last of those two excellent men. A churl's courtesy rarely comes but either for gain or falsehood. Betwixt the good and shade of good divided, we pity deem that which but weakness is, so are we from our high creation slided. And I pray you, did the sun ever bring you a fruitful harvest, but that it was more hot than pleasant? Have any of you children that be not sometimes cumbersome? Have any of you fathers that be not sometime wearish? What? Shall we curse the sun, hate our children, or disobey our fathers? O weak trust of the many-headed multitude, whom inconstancy only doth guide to well-doing! Who can set confidence there, where company takes away shame, and each may lay the fault on his fellow? They thought their knowledge notable, because they had at all no knowledge to condemn their own want of knowledge. For though she pass all things, yet what is all that unto me, who fare like him, that both looks to the skies, and in a ditch doth fall? What marvel if in youth such faults be done, since that we see our saddest shepherds out, who have their lesson so long time begun, quickly secure and easily in doubt, either asleep be all if not a sail, or all abroad if but a cub start out. We shepherds are like them that, under sail, do speak high words when all the coast is clear, yet to a passenger will bonnet veil. For as the arrival of enemies makes a town to fortify itself, as ever after it remains stronger, so that a man may say enemies were no small cause of the town's strength, so to a mind once fixed in a well-pleasing determination, who hopes by annoyance to overthrow it, doth but teach it to knit together all his best grounds, and so perchance of a chanceable purpose make an unchangeable resolution. Are oaths there to be believed where vows are broke? No, no. Who doth wound the eternal justice of the gods cares little for abusing their names, and who in doing wickedly doth not fear due recompensing plagues, doth little fear that invoking of plagues will make them come ever a whit the sooner. Among the best men are diversities of opinions, which are no more in true reason to breed hatred than one that loves black should be angry with him that is clothed in white. For thoughts and conceits are the very apparel of the mind. Knowing that the violence of sorrow is not at the first to be striven withal, being like a mighty beast, sooner tamed with following than overthrown by withstanding, they gave way unto it for that day and the next, never troubling him, either with asking questions or finding fault with his melancholy, but rather fitting to his dolorous discourses of their own and other folks' misfortune. Friendship is so rare as it is to be doubted whether it be a thing indeed or but a word. There is nothing more terrible to a guilty heart than the eye of a respected friend. For grief being not able to say anything, they rested with their eyes placed one upon another, in such sort as might well point out the true passion of unkindness to be never aright, but betwixt them that most dearly love. In my presence their tongues were turned into ears, and their ears were captives unto my tongue. Did I go to church? It seemed the very gods waited for me, their devotions not being solemnized till I was ready. Think, then, what my mind was, since withal there is no question. The fall is greater from the first to the second than from the second to the undermost. For now, from the multitude of followers, silence grew to be at my gate, and absence in my presence. The humour of youth ever thinks that good, whose goodness he sees not. Your countenance is troubled, which surely comes not of virtue, for virtue, like the clear heaven, is without clouds. Sick folks, when they are alone, think company would relieve them, and yet having company do find it noisome, changing willingly outward objects, when indeed the evil is inward. That which in a wise prince would be counted wisdom, in us will be taken for a light-grounded affection. So is not one thing one, done by diverse persons. But you, O you that think not tears too dear to spend for harms although they touch you not, and deign to deem your neighbour's mischief near, although they be of meaner parents got. You I invite with easy ears to hear the poor-clad truth of love's wrong-ordered lot. Who may be glad you be not such, who share in woe, way others have as much. While thus they ran a low but levelled race, while thus they lived, this was indeed a life, with nature pleased, content with present case, free of proud fears, brave beggary, smiling strife, of climb-fall court, the envy-hatching place, while those restless desires, in great men rife, to visit so low folks did much disdain. This while, though poor, they in themselves did reign. Anaxius, who had made fortune his creator and force his god, resolved now to make violence his orator. But Basilius was so perplexed that, not able to determine, he took the common course of men, to fly only then to devotion when they want resolution. Nature had done so much for them in nothing, as that it made them lords of truth, whereon all the other goods were builded. Therefore he chose out an officious servant, whom he esteemed very wise, because he never found him but just of his opinion. In sum, a man that could be as evil as he listed, and listed as much as any advancement might thereby be gotten. As for virtue, he counted it but a school name. But Philonax, with great mislike of his offer, he made him so peremptory an answer, not without threatening if he found him foster any such fancy, that Timautus went with an inward spite from him, whom before he had never loved, and measuring all men's marches by his own pace, rather thought it some further fetch of Philolanx, as that he would have all to himself alone, than was any way taken with the lovely beauty of his virtue, whose image he had so quite defaced in his own soul, that he had left himself no eyes to behold it. For by a strange composition of mind, there was no man more tenderly sensible in anything offered to himself, which in the farthest fet construction might be wrested to the name of wrong, no man that in his own actions could worse distinguish between valour and violence. A man of no wicked nature, nor willingly doing evil without himself mistake the evil, seeing it disguised under some form of goodness. But as I have seen one that was sick of a sleeping disease, could not be made wake but with pinching of him, so out of his sinful sleep his mind, unworthy so to be lost, was not to be called to itself, but by a sharp accident. We oft are angrier with the feeble fly, for business where it pertains him not, than with the poisonous toads that quiet lie. O wandering life, to what wilderness wouldst thou lead me? But, sorrow, I hope thou art sharp enough to save my labour from other remedies. In the end, Pamela yielded to her because she spake reason, and Philoclea yielded to her reason because she spake it. There is no sweeter taste of friendship than the coupling of souls in this mutuality, either of condoling or comforting, where the oppressed mind finds itself not altogether miserable, since it is sure of one which is feeling sorry for his misery, and the joyful spends not his joy either alone or there where it may be envied, but may freely send it to such a well-grounded object, from whence he shall be sure to receive a sweet reflection of the same joy, and as in a clear mirror of sincere goodwill, see a lively picture of his own gladness. Care, stirring the brains, and making thin the spirits, breaketh rest, but those griefs wherein one is determined there is no preventing, do breed a dull heaviness, which easily clothes itself in sleep. For such, alas, we are all, in such a mould are we cast, that with the too much love we bear ourselves, being first our own flatterers, we are easily hooked with others' flattery, we are easily persuaded of others' love. Nature gives not to us her degenerate children any more general precept than one to help the other, one to feel a true compassion of the other's mishap. For to do requires a whole heart, to suffer falleth easiliest in the broken minds. A lively spark of nobleness to descend in most favour to one when he is lowest in affliction. Riches of children pass a prince's throne, which touch the father's heart with secret joy, when without shame he saith, These be mine own. Nay, to the heavens your just complaining send, and stay the stars in constant race, till that they do unto our dollars bend, and ask the reason of that special grace, that they, which have no lives, should live so long, and virtuous souls so soon should lose their place. Ask if in great men good men do so throng, that he for want of elbow room must die. Like a man whose best building was a well-framed conscience, even with the grave behaviour of a wise father, whom nothing but love makes to chide, he thus said unto them, Even this, their hasty drawing to me, makes me think they will be as hastily withdrawn from me, for it is but one ground of inconstancy, soon to take, or soon to leave. To his heart, already overcome by sorrowfulness, even trifling misfortunes came to fill up the roll of a grieved memory, labouring only his wits to pierce farther and farther into his own wretchedness. They made him and the world quickly know that one man's sufficiency is more available than 10,000's multitude. So evil balanced be the extremities of popular minds, and so much natural imperiousness there rests in a well-formed spirit. For to those persons who have vomited out of their souls all remnants of goodness, there rests a certain pride in evil, and having else no shadow of glory left them, they glory to be constant in iniquity, and that, God knows, must be held out to the last gasp, without revealing their accomplices, as thinking great courage is declared in being neither afraid of the heavens nor ashamed of the world. Such is the disposition of the most sincere judgments, that as they can believe mean faults, and such as man's nature may slide into, so when they pass to a certain degree, nay, when they pass all degrees of unspeakable naughtiness, then find they in themselves a hardness to give credit that human creatures can so from all humanity be transformed. For thine own virtue's sake, let miseries be no music unto thee, and be content to take to thyself some colour of excuse, that thou didst not know to what extremity thy inconstancy, or rather falsehood, hath brought me. O strange mixture of human minds, only so much good left, as to make us languish in our own evils. The heart stuffed up with woefulness is glad greedily to suck the thinnest air of comfort. Men are loving creatures when injuries put them not from their natural course. Men are always cruel in their neighbours' faults, and make others' overthrow become the badge of their ill-masked virtue. He was, like one frozen with extremity of cold, over-hastily brought to a great fire, rather oppressed than relieved with such a lightning of felicity. He found that reason's self now reasons found to fasten knots which fancy first had bound. She was straight warned with the obedience of an overthrown mind. So it is in men, most of which are childish in the best things, till they be cradled in their graves. End of section 7. Read by Belinda McReynolds, Melbourne, 20th of May, 2024.
Section 8 of A Cabinet of Gems. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Claire. A Cabinet of Gems by Sir Philip Sidney. Edited by George MacDonald. Politics and Policy. These 30 years you have so governed this region that neither your subjects have wanted justice in you nor your obedience in them, and your neighbors have found you so hurtlessly strong that they thought it better to rest in your friendship than make new trial of your enmity. She made her people by peace warlike, her courtiers by sports learned, her ladies by love chaste. But as mischief is of such nature that it cannot stand but with strengthening one evil by another, and so multiply in itself till it come to the highest, and then fall with his own weight, so to their minds, once past the bounds of obedience, more and more wickedness opened itself, so that they who first pretended to preserve you, then to reform you, now thought no safety for them without murdering you. There was a notable example how great dissipations monarchical government is subject unto. For now their prince and guide had left them, they had not experienced to rule, and had not whom to obey. Public matters had ever been privately governed, so that they had no lively taste what was good for themselves, but everything was either vehemently desirable or extremely terrible. For the subjects could taste no sweeter fruits of having a king than grievous taxation to serve vain purposes, laws made rather to find faults than to prevent faults, the court of a prince rather deemed as a privileged place of the unbridled licentiousness than as the abiding of him who as a father should give a fatherly example unto his people. Hence grew a very dissolution of all estates, while the great men, by the nature of ambition never satisfied, grew facetious among themselves, and the underlings glad indeed to be underlings to them they hated least, to preserve them from such they hated most. Men of virtue suppressed, lest they, shining, should discover the other's filthiness, and at length virtue itself almost forgotten, when it had no hopeful end whereunto to be directed. Old men, long nuzzled in corruption, scorning them that would seek reformation, young men, very fault-finding but very faulty, and in some, left too long, I trouble you, all awry, and, which ride it to the most wry course of all, wit abused rather to feign reason why it should be amiss than how it should be amended. But when they began to talk of their griefs, never bees made such a confused humming, the town-dwellers demanding putting down of imposts, the country fellows laying out of commons. Some would have the prince keep his court in one place, some in another. All cried out to have new counsellors. But when they should think of any new, they liked them as well as any other that they could remember. Especially they would have the treasurer so looked to as that he should never need to take any more subsidies. At length they fell to direct contraries. For the artisans they would have corn and wine set at a lower price and bound to be kept so still. The ploughmen, vine labourers, and the farmers would none of that. The countrymen demanded that every man might be free in the chief towns. That could not the burgesses like of. The peasants would have all the gentlemen destroyed, the citizens especially, such as cooks, barbers, and those other that lived most on gentlemen, would but have them reformed. And of each side were like divisions, one neighbourhood beginning to find fault with another. but no confusion was greater than of particular men's likings and mislikings, one dispraising such a one whom another praised, and demanding such a one to be punished whom the other would have exalted. No less ado was there about choosing him who should be their spokesman. The finer sort of burgesses, as merchants, prentices, and cloth-workers, because of their riches, disdaining the baser occupations, and they because of their number, as much disdaining them, all they scorning the countryman's ignorance, and the countryman suspecting as much their cunning. But so soon as some few but indeed notable examples had thundered a duty into the subjects' hearts, he soon showed no baseness of suspicion, nor the basest baseness of envy, could any wit rule such a ruler. But then shined forth indeed all love among them, when an awful fear engendered by justice did make that love most lovely, his first and principal care being to appear unto his people such as he would have them be, and to be such as he appeared, making his life the example of his laws, and his laws, as it were, his axioms, arising out of his deeds. He knew how violently rumors do blow the sails of popular judgments, and how few there be that can discern between truth and truth-likeness, between shows and substance. Remembering only that himself was in the high seat of a king, he could not perceive that he was a king of reasonable creatures, who would quickly scorn follies and repine at injuries. What policy have you to bestow a benefit where it is counted an injury? Therefore, O judge, who I dost know what it is to be a judge, that your end is to preserve and not to destroy mankind, that laws are not made like lime twigs or nets, to catch everything that toucheth them, but rather like sea marks to avoid the shipwreck of ignorant passengers. You will not, I trust, at the persuasion of this brabbler, burn your house to make it clean, but like a wise father, turn even the fault of your children to any good that may come of it, since that it is the fruit of wisdom and end of all judgments. But wherein he sharpened his wits to the piercingest point was touching his men, knowing them to be the weapon of weapons, and master spring, as it were, which makes all the rest to stir, and that therefore in the art of man stood the quintessence and ruling skill of all prosperous government, either peaceable or military. He chose in number as many as without pestering, and so danger of infection, his victual would serve for 2 years to maintain, all of able bodies, and some few of able minds to direct, not seeking many commanders, but contenting himself that the multitude should have obeying wits, every one knowing whom he should command and whom he should obey, the place where and the matter wherein, distributing each office as near he could to the disposition of the person that should exercise it, knowing no love, danger, nor discipline can suddenly alter a habit in nature. Therefore would he not employ the still man to a shifting practice, nor the liberal man to a dispenser of his victuals, nor the kind-hearted man to be a punisher, but would exercise their virtues in sorts where they might be profitable, employing his chief care to know them all particularly and thoroughly, regarding also the constitution of their bodies, some being able better to abide watching, some hunger, some labor, making his benefit of each ability, and not forcing beyond power. Time to everything by just proportion he allotted, and, as well in that as in everything else, no small error winked at, left greater should be animated. Even of vices he made his profit, making the cowardly Clinias to have care of the watch, which he knew his own fear would make him very wakefully perform. End of Section 8.
Section 9 of A Cabinet of Gems. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. A Cabinet of Gems by Sir Philip Sidney, edited by George MacDonald. Nature and Art. As they passed in a pleasant valley, of either side of which high hills lifted up their beetle brows, as if they would overlook the pleasantness of their under prospect, they were by the daintiness of the place and the weariness of themselves invited to light from their horses, and pulled off their bits that they might something refresh their mouths upon the grass, which plentifully grew, brought up under the care of those well-shading trees. They themselves laid them down hard by the murmuring music of certain waters, which spouted out of the side of the hills, and in the bottom of the valley, made of many springs, a pretty brook, like a commonwealth of many families. They brought him to the house, about which they might see with fit consideration both of the air, the prospect, and the nature of the ground. All such necessary additions to a great house as might well show Calendar knew that provision is the foundation of hospitality, and thrift the fuel of magnificence. The house itself was built of fair and strong stone, not affecting so much any extraordinary kind of fineness as an honourable representing of a firm stateliness, the lights, doors, and stairs rather directed to the use of the guest than to the eye of the artificer, and yet as the one chiefly heeded, so the other not neglected, each place handsome without curiosity, and homely without loathsomeness, not so dainty as not to be trod on, nor yet slubbered up with good fellowship, all more lasting than beautiful, but that the consideration of the exceeding lastingness made the eye believe it was exceedingly beautiful. The servants, not so many in number as cleanly in apparel and serviceable in behaviour, testifying, even in their countenances, that their master took as well care to be served as of them that did serve. There were hills which garnished their proud heights with stately trees, humble valleys, whose base estate seemed comforted with the refreshing of silver rivers, meadows enamelled with all sorts of eye-pleasing flowers, thickets which, being lined with most pleasant shade, were witnessed so too by the cheerful disposition of many well-tuned birds, each pasture stored with sheep feeding with sober security, while the pretty lambs with bleating oratory craved the dam's comfort. Here a shepherd's boy piping as though he should never be old, there a young shepherdess knitting and withal singing, and it seemed that her voice comforted her hands to work, and her hands kept time to her voice music. So Ganesha herself bringing me to my lodging anon after, I was invited and brought down to sup with them in the garden, a place not fairer in natural ornaments than artificial inventions, where in a banqueting house among certain pleasant trees, whose heads seemed curled with the wrappings about of vine branches, the table was set near to an excellent waterwork, for by the casting of the water in most cunning manner, it makes with the shining of the sun upon it a perfect rainbow, not more pleasant to the eye than to the mind, so sensibly to see the proof of the heavenly iris. There were birds also made so finely, that they did not only deceive the sight with their figure, but the hearing with their songs, which the watery instruments did make their gorge deliver. The table at which we sat was round, which being fast to the floor whereon we sat, and that divided from the rest of the buildings with turning of ice, which Basilius at first did to make me sport, the table and we about the table did all turn round by means of water which ran under and carried it about as a mill. But alas, what pleasure did it to me to make divers times the full circle round about, since Philoclea, being also set, was carried still an equal distance from me, and that only my eyes did overtake her. They lighted down in a fair thick wood, which did entice them with the pleasantness of it to take their rest there. It was all of pine trees, whose broad heads meeting together yielded a perfect shade to the ground, where their bodies gave a spacious and pleasant room to walk in. They were set in so perfect an order that every way the eye being full, yet no way was stopped. And even in the midst of them were there many sweet springs which did loose themselves upon the face of the earth. It was indeed a place of delight, for through the midst of it there ran a sweet brook, which did both hold the eye open with her azure streams, and yet seek to close the eye with the purling noise it made upon the pebble stones it ran over. The field itself being set in some places with roses, and in all the rest constantly preserving a flourishing green. The roses added such a ruddy show unto it, as though the field were bashful at his own beauty. About it, as if it had been to enclose a theatre, grew such sort of trees as either excellency of fruit, stateliness of growth, continual greenness, or poetical fancies have made at any time famous. In most part of which there had been framed by art such pleasant arbours, that one answering another, they became a gallery aloft from tree to tree almost round about, which below gave a perfect shadow, a pleasant refuge then from the choleric look of Phoebus. O sweet woods, the delight of solitariness! Oh, how much do I like your solitariness! Here nor treason is hid, veiled in innocence, nor envy's snaky eye finds any harbour here, nor flatterers' venomous insinuations, nor cunning humourists' puddled opinions, nor courteous ruin of proffered usury, nor time prattled away, cradle of ignorance, nor causeless duty, nor cumber of arrogance, nor trifling title of vanity dazzleth us, nor golden manacles stand for a paradise. Here wrong's name is unheard, slander a monster is. Keep thy sprite from abuse, here no abuse doth haunt. What man grafts in a tree dissimulation? The two princes had leisure to see the practice of that which before they had learned by books, to consider the art of catching the wind prisoner, to no other end but to run away with it, to see how beauty and use can so well agree together that of all the trinkets wherewith ships are attired, there is not one but serves to some necessary purpose. End of section 9. Read by Sandra in Nova Scotia, 2024.
Section 10 of A Cabinet of Gems. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Claire. A Cabinet of Gems by Sir Philip Sidney, edited by George MacDonald. Horse, armor, attire, and combat. A few days since, he and Demetus had furnished themselves very richly to run at the ring before me. Oh, how mad a sight it was to see! Demetus, like rich tissue furred with lambskins, but oh, how well it did with Doris, to see with what a grace he presented himself before me on horseback, making majesty wait upon humbleness, how at the first standing, still with his eyes bent upon me, as though his motions were chained to my look, he so stayed till I caused Mopsa bid him do something upon his horse, which no sooner said, but with a kind rather of quick gesture than show of violence, you might see him come towards me, beating the ground in so due time as no dancer can observe better measure. If you remember the ship we saw once, when the sea went high upon the coast of Argos, so went the beast. But he, as if centaur-like he had been one piece with the horse, was no more moved than one with the going of his own legs. In effect, so did he command him as his own limbs. For though he had both spurs and wand, they seemed rather marks of sovereignty than instruments of punishment, his hand and leg with most pleasing grace, commanding without threatening, and rather remembering than chastising. At least if sometimes he did, it was so stolen as neither our eyes could discern it, nor the horse with any change did complain of it. He ever going for just with the horse, either forthright or turning that it seemed, as he borrowed the horse's body, so he lent the horse his mind. In the turning one might perceive the bridle hand something gently stir, but indeed so gently as it did rather distill virtue than use violence. Himself at one instant both steadiness and nimbleness, sometimes making him turn close to the ground, like a cat when scratching the wheels about after a mouse, sometimes with a little more rising before, now like a raven leaping from ridge to ridge, then like one of Demetus' kids, bound over the hillocks, and all so done as neither of the lusty kind showed any roughness, nor the easier any idleness, but still like a well-obeyed master, whose back is enough for a discipline, ever concluding each thing he did with his face to me towards, as if thence came not only the beginning but ending of his motions. The sport was to see Demetus, how he was tossed from the saddle to the mane of the horse, and thence to the ground, giving his gay apparel almost as foul an outside as it had an inside. But as before he had ever said he wanted but horse and apparel to be as brave a courtier as the best, so now, bruised with proof, he proclaimed it a folly for a man of wisdom to put himself under the tuition of a beast. So, as Dorcas was fain alone to take the ring, wherein truly at least my womanish eyes could not discern, but the taking his staff from his thigh, the descending it down a little, the getting of it up into the rest, the letting of the point fall, and taking the ring, was all but one motion. At least if they were divers motion, they did so stealthily flip one into another, as the latter part was ever in hand before the eye could discern the former was ended. Indeed, Demetus found fault that he showed no more strength in shaking of his staff, but to my conceit the fine cleanliness of bearing it was exceeding delightful. And so, as soon as the morning began to draw dew from the fairest greens to wash her face withal against the approach of the burning sun, he went to his stable, where himself chose out a horse, whom, though he was near 20 years old, he preferred for a piece of shore service before a great number of younger. His colour was of a brown bay, dappled thick with black spots, his forehead marked with a white star, to which in all his body there was no part suitable but the left foot before, his mane and tail black and thick, of goodly and well-proportioned greatness. He caused him to be trimmed with a sumptuous saddle of tawny and gold enamel, enriched with precious stones. His furniture was made into the fashion of the branches of a tree from which the leaves were falling, and so artificially were the leaves made, that as the horse moved, it seemed indeed that the leaves wagged as when the wind plays with them, and being made of a pale cloth of gold, they did bear the straw-coloured livery of ruin. His armour was also of a tawny and gold, but formed into the figures of flames, darkened as when they newly break the prison of a smoky furnace. In his shield he had painted the torpedo fish. But there he found Phalantus already waiting for him upon a horse milk white, but that upon his shoulder and withers he was freckled with red stains, as when a few strawberries are scattered into a dish of cream. He had caused his mane and tail to be dyed in carnation. His reins were vine branches, which engendering one with the other, at the end when it came to the bit, therefore the boss brought forth a cluster of grapes, by the workman made so lively that it seemed, as the horse champed on his bit, he chopped for them, and that it did make his mouth water to see the grapes so near him. His furniture behind was of vines, so artificially made as seemed the horse stood in the shadow of the vine, so prettily were clusters of ruby grapes dispersed among the trappers which embraced his sides. His armour was blue like the heaven, which a sun did with his rays, proportionately delivered, gild in most places. His shield was beautiful with this device, a greyhound which, overrunning his fellow and taking the hare, yet hurts it not when it takes it. The word was, the glory, not the prey. He sought out this new knight, whom he might easily find, for he, like a wanton rich man that throws down his neighbour's house to make himself the better prospect, so had his sword made him so spacious a room, that Amphialus had more cause to wonder at the finding than labour for the seeking. Therefore, they approaching one to the other, as in two beautiful folks love naturally stirs a desire of joining, so in their two courages hate stirred a desire of trial. Then began there a combat between them, worthy to have had more large lifts and more quiet beholders. For, with the spur of courage and the bit of respect, each so guided himself that one might well see the desire to overcome made them not forget how to overcome. In such time and proportion they did employ their blows, that none of Ceres' servants could more cunningly place his flail. While the left foot spur set forward his own horse, the right set backwards the contrary horse, even sometimes by the advantage of the enemy's leg, while the left hand, like him that held the stern, guided the horse's obedient courage, all done in such order that it might seem the mind was a right prince indeed, who sent wise and diligent lieutenants into each of those well-governed parts. But the more they fought, the more they desired to fight, and the more they smarted, the less they felt the smart. But Phalanx's men, as if with the loss of Phalanx they had lost the fountain of their valor, had their courages so dried up in fear that they began to set honor at their backs, and to use the virtue of patience in an untimely time. When into the press comes, as hard as his horse, more afraid of the spur than the sword could carry him, a knight in armour as dark as blackness could make it, followed by none and adorned by nothing, so far without authority that he was without knowledge. But virtue quickly made him known, and admiration bred him such authority, that though they of whose side he came knew him not, yet they all knew it was sit to obey him, and while he was followed by the valiantest, he made way for the vilest. For, taking part with the besiegers, he made the Amphialian's blood serve for a comparison to his horse, and a decking to his armour. His arm no ofter gave blows, than to the blows gave wounds, then the wounds gave death. So terrible was his force, and yet was his quickness more forcible than his force, and his judgment more quick than his quickness. For though his sword went faster than eyesight could follow it, yet his own judgment went still before it. Time, distance, and motion, custom made them so perfect in that as if they had been fellow counselors and not enemies, each knew the other's mind and knew how to prevent it. His horse was of a fiery sorrel, with black feet and black list on his back, who, with open nostrils, breathed war before he could see an enemy, and now up with one leg and then with the other, seemed to complain of nature that she had made him any whit earthy. Then would he add certain praises by telling what a peerless beast the horse was, the only serviceable courtier without flattery, the beast of a most beauty, faithfulness, courage, and such more, that if I had not been a piece of logician before I had came to him, I think he would have persuaded me to have wished myself a horse. At length he took a garment more rich than glaring, the ground being black velvet, richly embroidered with great pearl and precious stones, but they set so among certain tufts of cypress, that the cypress was like black clouds, through which the stars might yield a dark lustre. Upon her body she ware a doublet of sky-colored satin, covered with plates of gold, and as it were nailed with precious stones, that in she might seem armed. End of Section 10.
Section 11 of A Cabinet of Gems. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Larry Wilson. A Cabinet of Gems by Sir Philip Sidney. Edited by George MacDonald. On Poetry. For indeed, after the philosophers had picked out of the sweet mysteries of poetry the right discerning true points of knowledge, they forthwith put in it in a method and making a school art of that which the poets did only teach by divine delightfulness, beginning to spurn at their guides, like ungrateful prentices, were not content to set up shop for themselves, but sought by all means to discredit their masters. A poet no industry can make if his own genius be not carried into it, and therefore is an old proverb, Orator sit poeta nascitur, a sufficient probability that if ever learning come among them, it must be by having their hard dull wits softened and sharpened with the sweet delights of poetry. For until they find a pleasure in the exercise of the mind, great promises of much knowledge will little persuade them that know not the fruits of knowledge. And this poesy must be used by whosoever will follow St. Paul's counsel in singing psalms when they are merry, and I know is used with the fruit of comfort by some when in sorrowful pangs of their death-bringing sins they find the consolation of the never-ending goodness. For these be they which most properly do imitate to teach and delight, and to imitate borrow nothing of what is, hath been, or shall be, but range only reined with learned discretion into the divine consideration of what may be and should be. These be they that, as the first and most noble sort, may justly be termed vates. So these are waited on in the excellentest languages and best understanding, with the foredescribed name of poets. For these indeed do merely make to imitate, and imitate both to delight and teach, and delight to move men to take that goodness in hand, which without delight they would fly as from a stranger, and teach to make them know that goodness whereunto they are moved, which being the noblest scope to which ever any learning was directed, yet want there no idle tongues to bark at them. The greatest part of poets have apparelled their poetical inventions in that numberless kind of writing which is called verse. Indeed, but apparelled verse being but an ornament and no cause to poetry, since there have been many most excellent poets that never versified, and now swarm many versifiers that need never answer to the name of poets. It is not rhyming and versifying that maketh a poet, no more than a long gown maketh an advocate, who, though he pleaded in armour, should be an advocate and no soldier. But it is that feigning notable images of virtues, vices, and what else with that delightful teaching which must be the right describing note to know a poet by. This purifying of wit, this enriching of memory, enabling of judgment, and enlarging of conceit, which commonly we call learning, under what name soever it come forth, or to what immediate end soever it be directed, the final end is to lead and draw us to as high a perfection as our degenerate souls made worse by their clay lodgings, can be capable of. This, according to the inclination of man, bred many formed impressions. For some that thought this felicity principally to be gotten by knowledge, and no knowledge to be so high or heavenly as acquaintance with the stars, gave themselves to astronomy, others persuading themselves to be demigods, if they knew the causes of things, became natural and supernatural philosophers. Some an admirable delight drew to music, and some the certainty of demonstration to the mathematics, but all one another having this scope, to know and by knowledge to lift up the mind from the dungeon of the body, to the enjoying his own divine essence. But when by the balance of experience it was found that the astronomer looking to the stars might fall in a ditch, that the inquiring philosopher might be blind in himself, and the mathematician might draw forth a straight line with a crooked heart, then lo did proof the overruler of opinions make manifest that all these are but serving sciences, which as they have a private end in themselves, so yet are they all directed to the highest end of the mistress knowledge, by the Greeks architectonike, which standeth, as I think, in the knowledge of a man's self, in the ethic and politic consideration, with the end of well-doing, and not of well-knowing only. Even as the saddler's next end is to make a good saddle, but his further end is to serve a nobler faculty, which is horsemanship, so the horseman's to soldiery, and the soldier not only to have the skill, but to perform a practice of a soldier. So that the ending end of all earthly learning, being virtuous action, those skills that most serve to bring forth that, have a most just title to be princes over all the rest. Wherein easily we can show the poet is worthy to have it before any other competitors. And for the lawyer, though just be the daughter of justice, the chief of virtues, yet because he seeks to make men good, rather formidine pine than virtutus amore, or to say right, doth not endeavor to make men good, but that their evil hurt not others, having no care so he be a good citizen, how bad a man he be. Therefore, as our wickedness maketh him necessary, and necessity maketh him honorable, so is he not in the deepest truth to stand in rank with these, who all endeavor to take naughtiness away, and to plant goodness even in the secretest cabinet of our souls. Certainly, even our Saviour Christ could as well have given the moral commonplaces of uncharitableness and humbleness as the divine narration of Dives and Lazarus, or of disobedience and mercy as that heavenly discourse of the lost child and the gracious Father. But that his thorough searching wisdom knew the estate of Dives burning in hell, and of Lazarus in Abraham's bosom, would more constantly, as it were, inhabit both the memory and judgment. Truly for myself, meseems, I see before mine eyes the lost child's disdainful prodigality turned to envy a swine's dinner, which by the learned divines are thought not historical acts, but instructing parables. For conclusion, say the philosopher teacheth, but he teacheth obscurely, so as the learned only can understand him, that is to say, he teacheth them that are already taught. But the poet is the food for the tenderest stomachs. The poet is indeed the right popular philosopher. For indeed, if the question were, whether it were better to have a particular act truly or falsely set down, there is no doubt which is to be chosen, no more than whether you had rather have Vespasian's picture right as he was, or at the painter's pleasure nothing resembling. But if the question be for your own use in learning, whether it be better to have it set down as it should be, or as it was, then certainly is more doctrinable the feigned Cyrus in Xenophon, and the true Cyrus in Justin, and the feigned Aeneas in Virgil, than the right Aeneas in Darius Phrygius. As to a lady that desired to fashion her countenance to the best grace, a painter should more benefit her to portrait a most sweet face, writing Candidia upon it, than to paint Candidia as she was, whose horse sweareth was full ill-favoured. If evil men come to the stage, they ever go out, as a tragedy writer answered to one that misliked the show of such persons, so manacled as they little animate folks to follow them. But the history being captive to the truth of a foolish world is many times a terror from well-doing, and an encouragement to unbridled wickedness. For see we not valiant Miltiades wrought in his fetters, the just Phocion and the accomplished Socrates put to death like traitors, the cruel Severus live prosperously, the excellent Severus miserably murdered, Sylla and Marius dying in their beds, Pompey and Cicero slain, then when they would have thought exile a happiness. See we not virtuous Cato driven to kill himself, and rebel Caesar so advanced that his name yet after 1,600 years lasteth in the highest honour? I think that no man is so much philosophus as to compare the philosopher in moving with the poet, and that moving is of a higher degree. It may by this appear that it is well nigh both the cause and effect of teaching. For who will be taught if he be not moved with desire to be taught? And what so much good doth that teaching bring forth? I speak still of moral doctrine, as that it moveth one to do that which it doth teach. With a tale, forsooth, the poet cometh unto you, with a tale which holdeth children from play, and old men from the chimney corner, and pretending no more, doth intend the winning of the mind from wickedness to virtue. Truly I have known men that even with reading Amadis de Gaul, which God knows wanteth much of a perfect poesy, have found their hearts moved to the exercise of courtesy, liberality, and especially courage. For even those hard-hearted evil men who think virtue a school name, and know no other good but indulgere genio, and therefore despise the austere admonitions of the philosopher, and feel not the inward reason they stand upon, yet will be content to be delighted, which is all the good fellow poet seems to promise, and so steal to see the form of goodness, which seen they cannot but love, ere themselves be aware as if they took a medicine of cherries. As virtue is the most excellent resting place for all worldly learning to make his end of, so poetry, being the most familiar to teach it, and most princely to move towards it, in the most excellent work is the most excellent workman. Now, as in geometry the oblique must be known as well as the right, and in arithmetic the odd as well as the even, so in the actions of our life who seeth not the filthiness of evil wanteth a great foil to perceive the beauty of virtue. This doth the comedy handle, and little reason hath any man to say that men learn the evil by seeing it so set out, since there is no man living but by the force truth hath in nature. No sooner seeth these men play their parts, but wisheth them in pifternem, although perchance the sack of his own faults lies so behind his back that he seeth not himself to dance the same measure. Whereto yet nothing can more open his eyes than to see his own actions contemptibly set forth. The heroical poet doth not only teach and move to a truth, but teacheth and moveth to the most high and excellent truth, who maketh magnanimity and justice shine through all misty fearfulness and foggy desires, who, if the saying of Plato and Tully be true, that who could see virtue would be wonderfully ravished with the love of her beauty, this man setteth her out to make her more lovely in her holiday apparel to the eye of any that will deign not to disdain until they understand. Truly I note, in all that kind of people who seek a praise by dispraising others, that they do prodigally spend a great many wandering words in quips and scoffs, carping and taunting at each thing, which by stirring the spleen may stay the brain from a thorough beholding and worthiness of the subject. Those kind of objections, as they are full of very idle easiness, since there is nothing of so sacred a majesty but that an itching tongue may rub itself upon it, so deserve they no other answer but, instead of laughing at the jest, to laugh at the jester. Marry, these other pleasant fault-finders, who will correct the verb before they understand the noun, and confute others' knowledge before they confirm their own, I would have them only remember that scoffing cometh not of wisdom, so as the best title in true English they get with their merriments is to be called good fools, for so have our grave forefathers ever termed that humorous kind of jesters. Now for the poet, he nothing affirmeth, and therefore never lieth, in troth not labouring to tell you what is or is not, but what should or should not be. but truly many of such writings as come under the banner of unresistible love, if I were a mistress, would never persuade me they were in love. So coldly they apply fiery speeches, as men that had rather read lovers' writings, and so caught up certain swelling phrases, which hang together like a man that once told me the wind was at northwest by south, because he would be sure to name winds enow, than that in truth they feel those passions. For now they cast sugar and spice upon every dish that is served at the table. Like those Indians, not content to wear earrings at the fit and natural place of the ears, but they will thrust jewels through their nose and lips, because they will be sure to be fine. For the force of a similitude not being to prove anything to a contrary disputer, but only to explain to a willing hearer. When that is done, the rest is a most tedious prattling, rather overswaying the memory from the purpose whereto they were applied, than any wit informing the judgment already either satisfied, or by similitudes not to be satisfied. Persuasion is the chief mark of oratory. But for the uttering sweetly and properly the conceit of the mind, which is the end of speech, that hath the English equally with any other tongue in the world, and is particularly happy in compositions of 2 or 3 words together near the Greek, far beyond the Latin, which is one of the greatest beauties can be in a language. But if, such a but, you be born so near the dull-making cataract of Nilus that you cannot hear the planet-like music of poetry, if you have so earth-creeping a mind that it cannot lift itself up to look to the skies of poetry, or rather by a certain rustical disdain will become such a mome as to be a momus of poetry, then though I will not wish unto you the ass's ears of Midas, nor to be rhymed to death as is said to be done in Ireland, yet thus much curse I must send you, in the behalf of all poets, that while you live in love and never get favour for liking skill of a sonnet, and when you die, your memory die from the earth for want of an epitaph. End of section 11.
Section 12 of A Cabinet of Gems. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. A Cabinet of Gems by Sir Philip Sidney, edited by George MacDonald. Phrases, similes, epithets. She did apparel her apparel, and with the preciousness of her body made it most sumptuous. And then grief gat a seat in her softened mind, making sweetness of past comforts by due title claim tears of present discomforts. And since her fortune made her able to help as little as anybody, yet to be able to wail as much as anybody, solitary sorrow, with a continual circle in herself, going out at her own mouth, to come in again at her own ears. Beauty in me, said I, truly sighing. Alas, if there be any, it is in my eyes, which your blessed presence hath imparted unto them. She turned herself, looking back toward her wonted abode, and because of her parting, bearing much sorrow in her eyes, the lightsomeness whereof had yet so natural a cheerfulness as it made even sorrow seem to smile. She heard him as he happened to stir his upper garment, and perceiving him, rose up with a demeanour, where, in the book of beauty, there was nothing to be read but sorrow, for kindness was blotted out, and anger was never there. Pamela, giving sweetness to majesty, Philoclea, enriching nobleness with humbleness. In Philoclea a pretty fear came up, to endamask her rosy cheeks, but it was such a fear as rather seemed a kindly child to her innate humbleness than any other dismayedness. There is nothing so great which I will fear to do for you, no, nothing so small which I will disdain to do for you. Giving her such pretty presents as neither could weary him with the giving nor shame her for the taking. Like a child that some fair book doth find, with gilded leaves or coloured vellum plays, or at the most on some fine picture stays, but never heeds the fruit of writer's mind. He strake him upon the shoulder with a right old man's grace, that will seem livelier than his age will afford him. Children, about a tender father from a long voyage returned, with lovely childishness hang about him, and yet with simple fear measure by his countenance how far he accepts their boldness. and with that she prettily smiled, which mingled with her tears one could not tell whether it were a morning pleasure or a delightful sorrow, but like when a few April drops are scattered by a gentle zephyrus among the fine-coloured flowers. I know I am no traitor, and thou well knowest I'm no coward. I pray thee go away, and conquer thine own passions, and thou shalt make me soon yield to be thy servant. Wit learns in thee perfection to express. Not thou by praise, but praise in thee is raised. It is a praise to praise when thou art praised. He came with such an authority among us as if the planets had done enough for us, that by us once he had been delighted. Not long after whose birth, the Queen, as though she had performed the message for which she was sent into the world, returned again unto her Maker. Every turn with him was a downfall. She leapt to a target as one that well knew the first mark of valour to be defence. And oft whole troops of saddest words I stayed, striving abroad a-foraging to go. I had the sight of a goddess who in a definite compass can set forth infinite beauty. One that had marked him would have judged that his eyes would have run into him and his soul out of him. So unkindly did either take a scent of danger. The nearer danger approached, like the light of a glowworm, the less still it seemed. As in water, the more she grasped, the less she held. While Parthenia was lost, he counted not himself delivered. Will you reward with ungratefulness the very poison of manhood? With that he bustled up himself as though his heart would fain have walked abroad. With silence and patience, like a fair gorgeous armour hammered on by an ill-favoured smith, she abode her pitiless dealing with her. Their feet steady, their hands diligent, their eyes watchful, and their hearts resolute, ever hoping because he would not put himself into that hell to be hopeless. But she, receiving him after her wonted sorrowful but otherwise unmoved manner, it made him think his good success was but as a pleasant monument of a doleful burial, joy itself seeming bitter unto him, since it agreed not to her taste. The sun, like a noble heart, began to show his greatest countenance in his lowest estate. His son, indeed, seeing his father begin to fall, held him up in his arms, till a pitiless soldier at the other side with a mace brained him, making father and son become twins in the never again dying birth. He no more attentively marked his friend's discourse than the child that hath leave to play marks the last part of his lesson, or the diligent pilot in a dangerous tempest doth attend the unskilful words of a passenger. I pray you, think I have no joy but in you, and if you fill that with sorrow, what do you leave for me? With that he cast up his blind eyes as if he would hunt for light. Homer, a Greek, flourished before Greece flourished, in whose sweet heaven angels of high thoughts swarm. Wicked minds, blind to the light of virtue and owly-eyed in the night of wickedness, which at least would win him much time, the mother of many mutations. But if you had seen, when with trembling hand he had delivered the letter, how he went away, as if he'd been but the coffin that carried himself to his sepulchre. Love fellowship maintained friendship between the rivals, and beauty taught the beholders chastity. She could get no answer but a silence sealed up in virtue, and so sweetly graced as that in one instant it carried with it both resistance and humbleness. If he be peevish, yet is he my father, and how beautiful soever I be, I am his daughter, so as God claims at my hands obedience and makes me no judge of his imperfections. With a good grace, and made the more agreeable by a certain noble kind of piteousness. Those immoderate praises which the foolish lover thinks short of his mistress, though they reach far beyond the heavens. Ill-tasting wallowish medicine. The poor comfort of calamity, pity. Sleep, the elder brother of death. How often would she come creeping to me between gladness to be near me, and fear to offend me. I might have loved, and which had been most strange, begun my love after death. Drew back in such sort, that still their terror went forward. with an angerless bravery and an unabashed mildness, a slidingness of language, a most notable coward, and yet more strangely than rarely venturous in privy practices. She made such gainsaying answers as, while they strove to be overcome. The change you speak of falls not out by my impairing, but by your bettering. That huge and sportful assembly grew to him a tedious loneliness. His horse, with flat tiring, taught him that discreet stays make speedy journeys. To make forgetting sleep comfort a sorrowful memory. Standing upon his tiptoes and staring as if he would have had a mote pulled out of his eye. Turning upon her heart side. Ungrateful who is called, the worst of evils is spoken. A very rich diamond set but in a black horn, the word, yet still myself. Having a fortune sufficient to content, and he content with a sufficient fortune. I made countenance about her mouth, between simpering and smiling. Her scorn gold hair. He stood but turned as gyrosol to sun. Proud Boreas never ruled fleet, who Neptune's web on danger's distaff spun, with greater power than she. As rubies lustre when they rubbed be. For as for their shows and words, they are but fear babes. That skin, whose past praise hue scorns this poor term of white, laid hold on him with most lay-holding grace. Stella, whose voice when it singeth, angels to acquaintance bringeth. Sorrow only then hath glory, when 'tis excellently sorry. Desire still on the stilts of fear doth go. Wise silence is best music unto bliss. Ease, the nurse of poetry. Solitariness, the sly enemy that doth most separate a man from well-doing. Obscurely born, he had found out unblushing pedigrees. So did he imagine that nobody knew his baseness, while he himself turned his eyes from it. Shamed, I hate myself in sight of mountains, and stop mine ears lest I grow mad with music. At whose approach the sun rose in the evening, who where she went bare in her forehead mourning. Which heard, one nothing hears, if from his words the falsehood he do skin, words of noble favour and chaste plainness. Hailing kindness into her countenance. A mind having no limits of hope, not knowing why to fear. I wrought it but to make some tedious hours believe that I thought not of them. Wealthy weary folks and unconstant youths. A cunning fisher in troubled waters. Never taking pains to examine the quarrel, like a man whose will was his God, and his hand his law. The Basilians began to let their courage descend to their feet. O heavenly fool, thy most kiss-worthy face, anger invests with such a lovely grace, that anger's self I needs must kiss again. As the beholders were talking, there comes into the place where they ran a shepherd, stripling, for his height made him more than a boy, and his face would not allow him a man, brown of complexion, whether by nature or by the sun's familiarity, but very lovely withal, for the rest so perfectly proportioned that nature showed she doth not like men who slubber up matters of mean account, doing all things with so pretty a grace that it seemed ignorance could not make him do amiss, because he had a heart to do well. In such contemplation, or as I think more excellent, I enjoy my solitariness, and my solitariness perchance is the nurse of these contemplations. Eagles we see fly alone, and they are but sheep which always herd together. But words came halting forth, wanting invention's stay. Invention, nature's child, fled stepdame study's blows. Fool, said my muse to me, look in thy heart, and write. Tell me, my lamb of gold, so mayest thou long abide the day well fed, the night in faithful fold, so grow thy wool of note, in time that richly dyed it may be part of Mira's petticoat. Tell me if wolves the throat have caught of thy dear dam, or she from thee be stayed, or thou from her be strayed. Canst thou, poor lamb, become another's lamb? or rather till thou die, still for thy dam with be a waymenting cry. Ah, bed, the field where joy's peace some do see, the field where all my thoughts to war be trained. How is thy grace by my strange fortune stained? How thy lee shores by my sighs stormed be? Sorrow, then cherish me, for I am sorrow. No being now but sorrow I can have. Then deck me as thine own, thy help I borrow, since thou my riches art, and that thou hast enough to make a fertile mind lie waste. End of section 12. Read by Sandra in Nova Scotia, 2024.
Section 13 of A Cabinet of Gems. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Claire. A Cabinet of Gems by Sir Philip Sidney, edited by George MacDonald. From Letters. My pen I only practice when I write to you, but in truth I begin to find that by writing ill I only learn to write ill, and therefore I wish you would give me some rules for improving my style, and at the same time you may send me those other admonitions which you said you had put off till I should come to you. For I am sure that you will never exhaust your stock of counsel, and that my blunders will give ample scope for your lectures. Are you not amused to find that we Saxons begin to massimize? Footnote: surely this is not the proper translation of tucanarse. This and the following extracts, to the number of 9 in all, are from his Latin letter to his friend Languet, as translated by Mr. Pearce. The first of those letters he wrote at the age of 17. Languet, nearly 50 years older than Sir Philip, says, "That day on which I first beheld him with my eyes shone propitious to me." End of footnote. But you are not a man to be thanked for such a thing, for you are even now meditating greater kindness still, and in truth, as far as I am concerned, much as I am indebted to you, I am only too willing to owe you more. The chief object of my life, next to the everlasting blessedness of heaven, will always be the enjoyment of true friendship, and there you shall have the chiefest place. I readily allow that I am often more serious than either my age or my pursuits demand. Yet this I have learned by experience, that I am never less a prey to melancholy than when I am earnestly applying the feeble powers of my mind to some high and difficult object. For in your letters I fancy I see a picture of the age in which we live, an age that resembles a bow too long bent. It must be unstrung or it will break, and therefore do me this favor, my dearest Hubert, and as far as you can safely trust your sentiments in writing, let me have them. For your letters are most delightful to me for many reasons, and the one reason which includes all the rest is that they are yours. Be assured that there is nothing I call my own to which you have not by the same title a prior claim. But here we have the true enjoyment, or rather the true fruit of friendship, and namely that the recollection of a dear friend is not only a great relief under all sorrow, but that it doth in the midst of most grave affairs force a man to descend to a certain relaxation of his mind. And this refreshing of the mind consists more than anything else in that seemly play of humor which is so natural and so engrafted, so to speak, in the characters of some of the wisest men, that neither Socrates nor our own Moore could lose their jest even in the hour of death. So let us even be merry. I do not like the excessive politeness of that expression. You would not have troubled me about the book if you had not believed it to be in print. Why, even if I felt only ordinary affection for you, this sort of thing is so little and insignificant that it really does not merit thanks. But you have deserved so much of me that I doubt whether I shall ever feel such gratitude as I ought. And as to making return, I shall be utterly unable unless God grant me more than I dare to hope. And you must not charge upon me the saying, out of sight, out of mind, for I have never felt any diminution of that ardent affection with which I have always regarded you. But it has rather increased from day to day, and it is when absent that I have most of all felt the sweetness of your society. I know the only experience which I have gotten in travelling is to find how much I might have learned, and how much indeed I have missed, for want of directing my course to the right end and by the right means. Footnote: this and the following extracts, to the number of 8 in all, are from 2 letters to his brother Robert. End footnote. I am sure you have imprinted in your mind the scope and mark you mean by your pains to shoot at. For if you should travel but to travel, or to say you had travelled, certainly you should prove a pilgrim to no purpose. But I presume so well of you that though a great number of us never thought in ourselves why we went, but a certain tickling humour to do as other men had done, you propose, being a gentleman born, to furnish yourself with a knowledge of such things as may be serviceable for your country and calling, which certainly stands not in the change of air, for the warmest sun makes not a wise man, no, nor in learning languages, although they be of serviceable use, for words are but words in what language soever they be, and much less in that all of us come home full of disguisements, not only of apparel, but of our countenances, as though the credit of a traveller stood all upon his outside, but in the right informing your mind with those things which are most notable in those places which you come unto. Qui multos hominem mores cognavit et urbes. He does not mean by mores how to look or put off one's cap with a new-found grace, although true behaviour is not to be despised. Marry, my heresy is that the English behaviour is best in England and the Italians in Italy. And for the men you shall have there, although indeed some be excellently learned, yet are they all given to counterfeit learning, as a man shall learn among them more false grounds of things than in any place else that I know. For from a tapster upwards they are all discoursers. In fine, certain matters and qualities, as horsemanship, weapons, painting, and such, are better there than in other countries, but for other matters as well, if not better, you shall have them in nearer places. Now resteth in my memory but this point, which indeed is the chief to you of all others, which is the choice of what men you are to direct yourself to, for it is certain no vessel can leave a worse taste in the liquor it contains than a wrong teacher infects an unskilful hearer with that which hardly will ever out. I will not tell you some absurdities I have heard travellers tell. Taste him well before you drink much of his doctrine, and when you have heard it, try well what you have heard before you hold it for a principle. For one error is the mother of 1,000, but you may say, how shall I get excellent men to take pains to speak with me? Truly, in few words, either by much expense or much humbleness. Look to your diet, sweet Robin, and hold up your heart in courage and virtue. Truly great part of my comfort is in you. Be careful of yourself, and I shall never have cares. So you can speak and write Latin, not barbarously. I never require great study in Ciceronianism, the chief abuse of Oxford. Qui dum verba secantur res ipsis negligent. Now, sweet brother, take a delight to keep and increase your music. You will not believe what a want I find of it in my melancholy times. At horsemanship, when you exercise it, read Crison Claudio and a book that is called La Gloria del Cavallo, withal that you may join the thorough contemplation of it with the exercise, and so shall you profit more in a month than others in a year. And mark the biding, saddling, and curing of horses. I would, by the way, your worship would learn a better hand. You write worse than I, and I write evil enough. Once again, have a care of your diet, and consequently of your complexion. Remember, grator est veniens in pulchro corpore virtuis. When you play at weapons, I would have you get thick caps and braziers, and play out your play lustily, for indeed tricks and dalliances are nothing in earnest, for the time of the one and the other greatly differs. And use as well the blows as the thrust. It is good in itself, and besides exercises your breath and strength, and will make you a strong man at the tourney and barriers. First, in any case, practice the single sword, and then with the dagger. Let no day pass without an hour or two such exercise. The rest study or confer diligently, and so shall you come home to my comfort and credit. Lord, how I have babbled. Once again, farewell, dearest brother, your most loving and careful brother, Philip Sidney. You desired me to do it, and you desire to my heart as an absolute commandment. End of section 13.
Section 14 of A Cabinet of Gems. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Brian Wilson. A Cabinet of Gems by Sir Philip Sidney. Edited by George MacDonald. Spoken on his deathbed. Love my memory. Cherish my friends. Their faith to me may assure you that they are honest. But above all, govern your will and affection by the will and word of your Creator. In me, beholding the end of this world with all her vanities. I have vowed my life unto God, and if the Lord cut me off and suffer me to live no longer, Then I shall glorify him, and give up myself to his service. I had this night a trouble in my mind, for, searching myself, methought I had not a full and sure hold of Christ. After I had continued in this perplexity a while, how strangely God did deliver me! For it was a strange deliverance which I had. There came to my remembrance a vanity in which I delighted, whereof I had not rid myself. I rid myself of it, and presently my joy and comfort returned. I would not change my joy for the empire of the world. End of section 14.
Section 15 of A Cabinet of Gems. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. A Cabinet of Gems by Sir Philip Sidney, edited by George MacDonald. Appendix I. From the Psalms of David, translated by the Countess of Pembroke. Psalm 65. Sion, it is where thou art praised. Sion, O God, where vows they pay thee. There all men's prayers to thee raised, return possessed of what they pray thee. There thou my sins prevailing to my shame, dost turn to smoke of sacrificing flame. O he of bliss is not deceived, whom chosen thou unto thee takest, and whom into thy court received, thou of thy check-roll number makest. The dainty viands of thy sacred store shall feed him, so he shall not hunger more. From thence it is thy threatening thunder, lest we by wrong should be disgraced. Thou strike our foes with fear and wonder, O thou on whom their hopes are placed, whom either earth doth steadfastly sustain, or cradle rocks the restless wavy plain. Thy virtue stays the mighty mountains, girded with power, with strength abounding, the roaring dam of watery fountains, thy beck doth make surcease her founding. When stormy uproars toss the people's brain, that civil sea to calm thou bringst again. Where earth doth end with endless ending, all such as dwell, thy signs affright them. And in thy praise their voices spending, both houses of the sun delight them, both whence he comes, when early he awakes, and where he goes, when evening rest he takes. Thy eye from heaven this land beholdeth, such fruitful dews down on it raining, that storehouse like her lap enfoldeth, assured hope of ploughman's gaining. Thy flowing streams her drought doth temper so, that buried seed through yielding grave doth grow. Drunk is each ridge of thy cup drinking, each clod relenteth at thy dressing. Thy cloud-born waters inly sinking, fair spring sprouts forth, blessed with thy blessing. The fertile year is with thy bounty crowned, and where thou goest, thy goings fat the ground. Plenty bedews the desert places, a hedge of mirth the hills encloseth. The fields with flocks have hid their faces, a robe of corn the valleys clotheth. Deserts and hills and fields and valleys all rejoice, shout, sing, and on thy name do call. Psalm 93. Clothed with state and girt with might, monarch like Jehovah reigns. He who earth's foundation pight at first and yet sustains. He whose stable throne disdains motion's shock and age's flight. He who endless one remains, one the same in changeless plight. Rivers, yea, though rivers roar, roaring though sea billows rise, vex the deep and break the shore, stronger art thou, Lord of skies. Firm and true thy promise lies. Now and still as heretofore, holy worship never dies, in thy house where we adore. Psalm 96. Sing and let the song be new, unto him that never endeth, sing all earth and all in you. Sing to God and bless his name, of the help, the health he sendeth, day by day new ditties frame. Make each country know his worth, of his acts the wondred story, paint unto each people forth. For Jehovah great alone, all the gods for awe and glory, far above doth hold his throne. For but idols, what are they, whom besides mad earth adoreth? He the skies in frame did lay, grace and honour are his guides, majesty his temple storeth, might in guard about him bides. Kindreds come, Jehovah give, O give Jehovah all together, force and fame whereso you live. Give his name the glory fit, take your offerings, get you thither, where he doth enshrined sit. Go, adore him in the place, where his pomp is most displayed. Earth, oh go with quaking pace, go proclaim Jehovah King. Stayless world shall now be stayed, righteous doom his rule shall bring. Starry roof and earthly floor, sea and all that wideness yieldeth, now rejoice and leap and roar. Leafy infants of the wood, fields and all that on you feedeth, daunce, O daunce at such a good. For Jehovah cometh, lo, lo to reign Jehovah cometh, under whom you all shall go. He the world shall rightly guide, truly as a king becometh, for the people's will provide. Psalm 139. O Lord, in me there lieth naught, but to thy search revealed lies. For when I sit, thou markest it, no less thou notest when I rise. Yea, closest closet of my thought hath open windows to thine eyes. Thou walkest with me when I walk, when to my bed for rest I go. I find thee there, and everywhere. Not youngest thought in me doth grow. No, not one word I cast to talk, but yet unuttered thou dost know. If forth I march, thou goest before. If back I turn, thou comest behind. So forth nor back thy guard I lack, nay, on me too thy hand I find. Well I thy wisdom may adore, but never reach with earthy mind. To shun thy notice, leave thine eye, or whither might I take my way? To starry sphere, thy throne is there. To dead men's undelightsome stay, there is thy walk, and there to lie, unknown in vain I should essay. O sun, whom light nor flight can match, suppose thy lightful, flightful wings thou lend to me, and I could flee, as far as thee the evening brings. Even led to west he would me catch, nor should I lurk with western things. Do thou thy best, O secret night, in sable veil to cover me. Thy sable veil shall vainly fail, with day unmasked my night shall be, for night is day and darkness light, O Father of all lights to thee. End of section 15.
Section 16 of A Cabinet of Gems. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. A Cabinet of Gems by Sir Philip Sidney, edited by George MacDonald. Appendix II. From an Elegy or Friend's Passion for his Astrophel by Matthew Raden. When he descended down to the mount, his personage seemed most divine. 1,000 graces one might count upon his lovely cheerful eyne. To hear him speak and sweetly smile, you were in paradise the while. A sweet, attractive kind of grace, a full assurance given by looks, continual comfort in a face, the lineaments of gospel books. I trow that countenance cannot lie, whose thoughts are legible in the eye. Was never eye did see that face, was never ear did hear that tongue, was never mind did mind his grace, that ever thought the travail long. but eyes and ears and every thought were with his sweet perfections caught. O God, that such a worthy man, in whom so rare deserts did reign, desired thus must leave us then, and we to wish for him in vain. O could the stars that bred that wit in force no longer fixed fit, then being filled with learned dew, the muses willed him to love. That instrument can aptly show how finely our conceits will move. As Bacchus opes dissembled hearts, so love sets out our better parts. Although thy beauty do exceed in common sight of every eye, yet in his poesies when we read, it is apparent more thereby, he that hath love and judgment too, sees more than any other do. From the life of the renowned Sir Philip Sidney, by Lord Brooke. For my own part, I observed, honoured, and loved him so much, as with what caution soever I have passed through my days hitherto, as among the living, yet in him I challenge a kind of freedom even among the dead. Of whose youth I will report no other wonder but this, that though I lived with him and knew him from a child, yet I never knew him other than a man, with such staidness of mind, lovely and familiar gravity, as carried grace and reverence above greater years. His talk ever of knowledge, and his very play tending to enrich his mind, so as even his teachers found something in him to observe and learn above that which they had read or taught, which eminence by nature and industry made his worthy father style Sir Philip in my hearing, though I unseen, lumen familiae suae. But the truth is, his end was not writing even while he wrote, nor his knowledge moulded for tables or schools, but both his wit and understanding bent upon his heart to make himself and others, not in words or opinion, but in life and action, good and great. In which architectural art he was such a master, with so commending and yet equal ways amongst men, that wheresoever he went, he was beloved and obeyed, yea, into what action soever he came last at the first, he became first at the last. The whole managing of the business, not by usurpation or violence, but, as it were, by right and acknowledgment, falling into his hands as into a natural centre. William of Orange protested unto me, and for her service, that if he could judge, her Majesty had one of the ripest and greatest counsellors of estate in Sir Philip Sidney, that at this day lived in Europe, the trial of which he was pleased to leave his own credit engaged, until her Majesty might please to employ this gentleman either amongst her friends or enemies. This narration I adventure of, to show the clearness and readiness of this gentleman's judgment in all degrees and offices of life, with this further testimony to him, that after mature deliberation being once resolved, he never brought any question of change to afflict himself with or perplex the business, but left the success of his will that governs the blind prosperities and unprosperities of chance, and so works out his own ends by the erring frailties of humane reason and affection. Sir Francis Walsingham had influence in all countries and a hand upon all affairs, yet even this man hath often confessed to myself that his Philip did so far overshoot him in his own bow, as those friends which at first were Sir Philip for this secretary's sake, within a while became so fully owned and possessed by Sir Philip, as now he held them at the second hand by his son-in-law's native courtesy. Indeed, he was a true model of worth, a man fit for conquest, plantation, reformation, or what action soever is greatest and hardest amongst men. Withal, such a lover of mankind and goodness, that whoever had any real parts in him found comfort, participation, and protection to the uttermost of his power. Like Zephyrus, he giving life where he blew. Soldiers honoured him, and were so honoured by him, as no man thought he marched under the true banner of Mars, that had not obtained Sir Philip Sidney's approbation. Men of affairs in most parts of Christendom entertained correspondency with him. But what speak I of these with whom his own ways and ends did concur? Since, to descend, his heart and capacity were so large, that there was not a cunning painter, a skilful engineer, an excellent musician, or any other artificer of extraordinary fame, that made not himself known to this famous spirit, and found him his true friend without hire, and the common rendezvous of worth in his time. For to this active spirit of his all depths of the devil prove but shallow fords. He, piercing into men's counsels and ends, not by their words, oaths, or compliments, all barren in that age, but by fathoming their hearts and powers by their deeds, and found no wisdom where he found no courage, nor courage without wisdom, nor either without honesty and truth. Sir Philip Sidney is none of this number, for the greatness which he affected was built upon true worth, esteeming fame more than riches, and noble actions far above nobility itself. He had so sweetly yoked fame and conscience together in a large heart. The end. End of section 16, read by Alan Mapstone. End of A Cabinet of Gems, cut and polished by Sir Philip Sidney. Now for the more radiance, presented without their setting by George MacDonald.